Chapter 981. Kuang Xieyue had only speculated that the key was in Chu Xiu's hands. He was just looking for an excuse to convince Lin Songlong. But hearing Kuang Xieyue's words, Lin Songlong only looked at him suspiciously and didn't say anything. If the sky-piercing key had been in Chu Xiu's hands back then, it would have been a great achievement for him to retrieve it. At this moment, the scene of Yi Xiaonan fighting with Su Ci and the others was transmitted to them. Feeling Yi Xiaonan's powerful strength, Lin Songlong and Kuang Xieyue's expressions changed slightly. After a while, Kuang Xieyue murmured, "Old Lin, do you think Yi Xiaonan's strength has already caught up to the sect master?" Lin Songlong snorted coldly and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? In this world, Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji have already left. Who else can be the sect master's match? No matter how strong Yi Xiaonan is, he can't be on par with the sect master. He doesn't deserve to be on par with the sect master." Kuang Xieyue opened his mouth but didn't say anything. He had never doubted the sect master's strength. But in the entire martial world, there was no strongest, only stronger. Kuang Xieyue wanted to say that person's name but didn't. Among the 9 heavenly generals of Elysium, they were naturally loyal to Elysium. Those who weren't loyal couldn't become heavenly generals. But the problem was that Lin Songlong's loyalty to Elysium's sect master was no longer as simple as that. It had even risen to the level of worship. He worshipped Jun Wuxian like a god. If he said that person's name, Lin Songlong would probably turn hostile on the spot. Lin Songlong didn't say anything else. They were already fighting. Who knew what they had found? Would there be a key among them? They couldn't fall behind. At this time, the place where Yi Xiaonan and the others were fighting had already become a vast swamp. Only the underground river in the sky had already healed under some strange rule. There was no water flowing backwards, but the ground had already been submerged. Only some higher ground could be seen above the water. At this moment, Su Ci and the others were not the only ones besieging Yi Xiaonan. Dong Huangtai and the rest of the bright demons were also resisting the attacks of the righteous cultivators. Moreover, it was not only the people from the righteous Dao. Some of the devil Dao rogue cultivators who had parted ways with Chu Xiu were also trying to break through the blockade of the moon-worshipping cult in the melee and grab the things inside. Seeing this scene, Chu Xiu suddenly felt a lot more comforted. Previously, he had thought that Han Qiuhong and Situchi had dared to provoke him because he was not powerful enough. But from the looks of it now, it wasn't because of him. Everyone was greedy. And in the face of greed, fear and even death could be diluted. Everyone looked behind Dong Huangtai and the others, wanting to see what they were protecting. Behind Dong Huangtai and the others was a high platform. To be more precise, it should be the peak of a tall mountain. However, the mountain was submerged, so what was exposed above the water was only a high platform. Countless demonic pattern chains wrapped around the high platform, just like the deep pool that Chu Xiu had encountered before. These demonic pattern chains were also formed by the heavens and earth. However, the number of chains was 100 times that of the deep pool. Countless demonic pattern chains were densely packed together, and the demonic qi was concentrated to the extreme. It was simply terrifying. The place where the dragon vein converges. Wei Shuya suddenly blurted out. Chu Xiu was stunned. "Old Wei, you're also proficient in feng shui?" Wei Shuya shook his head. "Of course I don't know this thing, but the terrain here is exactly the same as the description of the Holy Church's terrain left behind in the ancient records. Although this is a dragon vein, it is not the dragon vein of an imperial court. Instead, it is the dragon vein of the demon dragon, which contains extremely evil demonic qi. The peak of the Holy Church is where the dragon vein converges, so it condenses the rootless sacred flame that can refine a true god. The power of the demon dragon's dragon vein in the primitive devil cave is even greater. What did it condense?" Everyone looked at the peak of the dragon vein. What Yi Xiaonan and the others were fighting over should be the thing on the peak. However, the thing condensed on the peak of the dragon vein was a little strange. Almost no one present could recognize what it was. One of the things was a stone knife. To be precise, it was a blade-shaped stone that emitted an astonishing demonic qi. The other was an irregular black stone that was suspended in mid-air. It was covered with black demonic patterns. Seeing this black stone, Chu Xiu's eyes narrowed. He had already recognized it. This black stone was exactly the same as the sky-piercing key. Of course, it was not accurate to say that it was exactly the same. The patterns on the black stone were black demonic patterns, but there was only a small difference. These two things did not attract too much attention. In fact, it was the last thing that attracted everyone's attention. The last thing was a strange black crystal. Its surface was crystal clear and incomparably smooth. It was like an eye. The moment everyone saw the demonic crystal, they were stunned, as if they were deeply immersed in it. Everyone in the demonic path knew this thing. To be precise, all the demonic path experts had heard of it. This thing was called the Khanate demon seed. It was said to be an eye of the myriad demon ancestor. It contained the power of the demonic path, and was abnormally powerful. Before Duguwewe had won, if anyone in the Kunlun devil cult made a great contribution, they would be qualified to cultivate in front of the demon seed for a day. This item could be said to be a true supreme treasure of the demonic path. Even if one were to cultivate in its surroundings for a single day, they would be able to obtain countless benefits, let alone directly ingest and refine it. Although the crowd did not know why Duguwewa did not refine it, they did not know why. However, this Khanate demon seed was a little strange. It was a little too small. It was only the size of a thumb. It was said that the demon seed that Duguwewe had was the size of a palm. At this moment, these things were surrounded by many demonic patterns. The natural demonic patterns had already condensed into a formation, actively protecting the three things from being destroyed by the power of the outside world. Chushio touched his chin. He seemed to have guessed what was going on. This place was indeed a land of treasures. Countless treasures of the devil path could be condensed here, including the Khanate devil bead that was condensed in the strange pond. It was also a type of devil seed, but it was not as powerful as the one before. Duguwewe had come to this place in the past, so all the good things should have been looted by Duguwewe. However, Duguwewe was still quite careful. He did not directly destroy the root of the problem. Instead, he preserved the demonic dragon's dragon vein. Within 500 years, the demonic aura condensed and formed another demon seed, but it was much smaller than before. However, what was going on with the blade-shaped stone, and the thing that was almost no different from the sky-piercing key? Did Duguwewe not take it away last time, or did it appear in the past 500 years? At this moment, Lu Jianghe transmitted his voice to Chu Xiu. Kid, if there is a chance to fight for it later, it would be best if you can get the demon seed. If you can't get the demon seed, go for the stone knife. There will be a surprise. Chu Xiu was stunned. Surprise? What surprise? Lu Jianghe chuckled and said, I dare to guarantee that no one in the pugilistic world knows about this except for me. You have all heard of the knife, listened to the spring rain at night, that the sect master brought out from the primitive devil cave. However, think about it. Even if the power of heaven and earth could really give birth to a knife, how could it be so exquisite and have a poem on it? When the sect master brought out Listen to the Spring Rain from the primitive devil cave, it was actually a stone knife like this. After returning to the saint sect, the sect master used the rootless sacred flame to refine all the stones on the outside of the stone knife, revealing the blade inside. After the sect master meticulously carved it, it became the current demon knife, Listen to the Spring Rain. However, the sect master is good at everything, except for his poor naming skills. Listen to the Spring Rain was named by the Red Lotus demon Venerable. A strange look appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. In that case, Listen to the Spring Rain was actually formed by heaven and earth, and this stone knife had the same origin as Listen to the Spring Rain. At this time, with the arrival of Chu Xiu and the others, the battle had already begun to escalate. Although Chu Xiu had yet to enter the battlefield, Ling Yunzi had already led the people of the Chunyang Dao sect and charged forward. Su Yun and the others also joined the battle. Yi Xiaonan's expression did not change in the face of so many people's attacks, but the moon blades around him danced more and more rapidly. One moon blade forcibly resisted the sword Hut's 10,000 sword catalog, and the former sword Saint Yi Feiyu's broken sword. Chu Xiu looked around and furrowed his brows. In the end, he shouted in a low voice, Attack! At present, the entire battlefield was in a mess. Schemes and methods of breaking out of this situation were already useless. The only thing left was to fight. Only the heavens knew who would be able to seize the treasure in the end. Even with the strength that Yi Xiaonan had revealed, he didn't dare say who would emerge victorious in the end. Although Yi Xiaonan had the strength to fight many alone, the moon-worshipping cult and the entire bright demon lineage had limited strength. It was obvious that they could not hold on much longer. However, with the addition of Chu Xiu's side, the entire situation changed. Something like a demon seed was useless to the warriors of the righteous path, but to the warriors of the demonic path, it was the most precious of all treasures. As the number one person of the demonic path, Yi Xiaonan's strength was already shocking enough. If he refined the demon seed, everyone was afraid that he would become the second Dugu Weiwei. As for Chu Xiu, although his strength was far inferior to Yi Xiaonan's, Chu Xiu's potential was too shocking. Everyone was afraid that Chu Xiu would become the second Yi Xiaonan. In the Jianghu, Yi Xiaonan and the moon-worshipping cult were already enough to prevent the demonic path from losing. If Chu Xiu was added, the situation that the righteous path had spent 500 years suppressing the demonic path might change again. Thus Su Xiai, who was fighting with Yi Xiaonan, could only sigh and turn to attack Shang Tianliang. At the same time, he sent a group of people to deal with Chu Xiu. However, at this moment, Kuang Shiyue and Lin Songlong appeared at the edge of the battlefield. In an instant, they attracted everyone's attention. Chapter 982. The divine generals of the Elysium were experienced, but even Lin Songlong and Kuang Shiyue could not help but be speechless. At this moment, when the righteous martial artists saw the people from Elysium coming, they frowned and looked worried. The scene was chaotic enough, but the people of the Elysium had gotten involved. Some people did not know how to deal with it. This was because no one knew what the attitude of the Elysium was. The Elysium was neither righteous nor demonic, but the people of the Elysium were proficient in demonic techniques. If they obtained the demonic seed, no one knew whether it would be a good or bad thing. Lin Songlong and Kuang Shiyue also saw the thing that looked like the key to heaven. Their eyes lit up. The leader's analysis was right. There was indeed a key to heaven here. At this time, Su Yun said in a low voice, "The two of you from the Elysium, do you also want the thing in the primitive demon's cave?" If other warriors questioned the divine generals of the Elysium like this, Lin Songlong and Kuang Shiyue would definitely ignore them. However, Su Yun was in the top 3 of the Wind Cloud list, the first seat of the Great Light Temple. Moreover, Su Xiai was here. No matter how arrogant Lin Songlong and Kuang Shiyue were, they would not offend the Great Light Temple at this time. Hearing this, Lin Songlong said in a low voice, "Master Su Yun, our purpose here is different from yours. The Elysium has not participated in the battle between the righteous and demonic forces for a long time. You should know our attitude. We don't want the demonic seed, and the Elysium is not interested in it. We just want the other stone." Hearing that the people of the Elysium did not want the demonic seed, the righteous warriors present were relieved. After all, in their opinion, the demonic seed was the most important to them. As long as the demonic seed was kept in the hands of the righteous martial artists and sealed by them, there would be no problem. Seeing that Su Yun wanted to say something, Lin Songlong said first, "Master Su Yun, the Elysium has never had any conflicts with the sects in the underworld. The Elysium has its missions, and you have your pursuits. Both sides mind their own business. Some things are better not knowing, isn't it?" Hearing Lin Songlong say this, Su Yun did not continue to ask. Many people did not know what the Gate of Heaven had been doing all these years. They only knew that the Gate of Heaven seemed to be searching for something. However, the Elysium rarely clashed with some of the big sects in the Jianghu. Even if they sometimes did not follow the rules, because of the Elysium's own strength, no one dared to provoke them. It was not worth it to provoke such a powerful colossus like the Elysium for some unknown reason. However, at this moment, Kuang Shiyue suddenly looked at Chu Xiu and sneered. "Chu Xiu, they say that one who survives a great disaster is bound to have good fortune later on. I really didn't expect that the old monk from the Sabodhi monastery wouldn't be able to kill you." Chu Xiu's expression was calm as he said, "I never thought that you would actually dare to appear in front of me again. Do you really think that I won't dare to kill you just because you're from the Elysium?" As he spat out the last word, Chu Xiu's face was full of killing intent. Kwang Xieyue had really wanted to kill Chu Xiu back in the illusionary realm 6. At that time, although Chu Xiu was not as strong as he was now, he was still the number one among the younger generation. In the end, he was still chased by Kwang Xieyue and ended up in a miserable state. Chu Xiu had never been a magnanimous person. On the contrary, he could hold a grudge for a lifetime. When would there be an end to revenge? When he died, or when his enemy died, the grudge would be over. Previously, Chu Xiu had told Lin Songlong that he would go to the Elysium one day to kill Kwang Xieyue. At that time, Chu Xiu was not just talking about saving face. He was really confident that he would eventually have that kind of strength. But that was in the future, not now. Therefore, as long as Kwang Xieyue did not appear in front of him, Chu Xiu would naturally not cause trouble for him. Going to the Elysium now was purely courting death. But who would have thought that Kwang Xieyue would dare to appear in front of him? Kwang Xieyue's lips curled into a sinister smile. He said, "Kill me? Chu Xiu, you are the most courageous person I have ever met in my life. For so many years, almost no Elysium divine generals have fallen outside. You dare to kill them, but can you kill me?" "Oh, no one has fallen outside." "That's true, because the most people you have ever lost was when you were massacred by Dugu Weiwei at your doorstep. Your entire family was almost wiped out." Chu Xiu said these words lightly. Kwang Xieyue's and Lin Songlong's faces darkened. This matter was a taboo in the entire Elysium. For so many years, this was the most tragic loss that the Elysium had ever suffered. They were almost wiped out. However, Lin Songlong pulled Kwang Xieyue and transmitted his voice. "What did I tell you just now? Don't cause trouble. If you want to provoke Chu Xiu, hand over the heavenly key first." Lin Songlong had always prioritized the Elysium's mission. Before the mission, he did not want to cause any trouble. However, once Kwang Xieyue went crazy, he did not care about the mission. He did not care about what Lin Songlong said. Instead, he stared at Chu Xiu and said coldly, "Kid, is the heavenly key in your hands? If you obediently hand over that thing to me, I will temporarily forget about the enmity between us. Today, I will not come looking for trouble with you again. However, if you don't hand it over, don't blame me for being rude." Upon hearing this, Chu Xiu was shocked. How did Kwang Xieyue know that the heavenly key was in his hands? No one should have known about this. Even though Chu Xiu had used the heavenly key to bring people from the merchant city back from the green capital, Shang Tianliang did not know what was going on. Chu Xiu did not expect that Kwang Xieyue had just casually made up an excuse to cause trouble for Chu Xiu. A murderous look appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. "Rude? I want to see how rude you can be." As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, he temporarily gave up fighting with the righteous people and rushed straight towards Kwang Xieyue. Seeing that Chu Xiu had taken the initiative to rush towards him, Kwang Xieyue's eyes revealed a crazy murderous look. He had always been the kind of person who would go crazy when faced with people. For so many years, he had never suffered such a big loss in the hands of anyone. Last time he had suffered a loss in the hands of Chu Xiu. Originally, Chu Xiu was already dead, so he naturally would not stoop to the level of a dead man. However, who would have thought that Chu Xiu was not dead? This gave Kwang Xieyue a feeling that he had been played. This feeling was very unpleasant, so he wanted to take this opportunity to turn Chu Xiu's fake death into a real one. As the blood-colored moonlight fell, the scimitar in Kwang Xieyue's hand seemed to tear the world in front of him apart. The surrounding demon qi was even absorbed by the power of the scimitar. With a layer of black demon qi, the scimitar's power increased by 30%. In the martial arts of the Heavenly Gates warriors, there was no distinction between the righteous and the demonic, only the strong and the weak. As long as the power was strong enough, it did not matter what the righteous or demonic path was. As long as it was suitable for them, they could practice it. Looking at Kwang Xieyue's scimitar, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a look of mockery. In the past, in the illusory 6 realms, he had been chased miserably by Kwang Xieyue. He had even had to use some tricks to escape. But things were different now. Chu Xiu was no longer the Chu Xiu of the past, and he, Kwang Xieyue, had not made any progress. The sea-breaking scimitar came crashing down. That violent gang qi seemed to tear the world apart. Wherever it passed, the water of the underground river on the ground was completely torn apart. Even the space was distorted. The 7 limits were evolved from extreme power. This scimitar was also the scimitar that could best reflect Chuxio's current power. The sea-breaking scimitar collided with Kuang Xiewe's scimitar. In an instant, a powerful force exploded, as if the sky was collapsing. Countless underground river water exploded, and the moonlight also melted. The expression on Kuang Xiewe's face instantly changed from madness to shock. He was extremely shocked. He had never expected that Chuxio's strength would grow to such an extent in such a short period of time. He couldn't take this saber strike. Kuang Xiewe's impression of Chuxio's power came from Lin Songlong. Lin Songlong had cooperated with Chuxio last time. After returning, he naturally mentioned this matter to Kuang Xiewe. At that time, Chuxio had just stepped into the real fire refinement realm. Kuang Xiewe was confident that he would not be afraid of Chuxio with his own power. But now Chuxio had stepped into the real fire refinement realm. Few people knew about this. Before coming to the primitive devil cave, Chuxio had only sparred with Shang Tianliang. Even if others knew, it would be useless. Because Kuang Xiewe did not have the opportunity to inquire about Chuxio's strength. He had followed Lin Songlong this time with ulterior motives. He would not tell Lin Songlong the truth if he was not there. How would he have the time to investigate Chuxio's information? After the two collided, Chuxio stood with his scimitar. The powerful demonic energy around him was like a whirlpool. The surrounding underground river water even formed a huge whirlpool around him. However, it was still 10 feet away from him. Not a single drop of water fell on him. On the other hand, Kuang Xiewe was in an incomparably sorry state. He was directly blasted into the water by the power of Chuxio's scimitar. After a few breaths he reappeared. Gang energy erupted around him, parting the water. His eyes were still filled with disbelief. The other righteous martial artists saw that Chuxio and the divine general of Elysium were engaged in a fierce battle. They all breathed a sigh of relief. Guarding against one Yi Xiaonan was already difficult enough. Guarding against another Chuxio made them feel even more pressured. Now that Chuxio and the divine general of Elysium were engaged in a fierce battle, this was a good thing. In any case, they did not have an intuitive understanding of the divine general of Elysium. As long as the other side was not from the demonic lineage, it would be fine. Seeing that Chuxio was about to attack, Lin Songlong immediately blocked in front of Chuxio. He said in a deep voice, "Chuxio, we did not come for you this time. Kuang Xiewe's madness has nothing to do with the divine general. It is just a misunderstanding. Don't take it seriously. You retreat. I will block him. You take your demonic seed. My Elysium will take what we want. We will not fight." Chapter 983. Lin Songlong was still considered to be more rational. To him, the Heaven's Gate had no enemies. It was just a mission that belonged to him. Even if the Kunlun demon sect had almost annihilated the Heaven's Gate in the past, that was all in the past. Nothing was more important than retrieving the All-Heaven Key. Kuang Xiewe, that lunatic, had actually provoked Chuxio even though he had already warned him. Moreover, Chuxio's strength had indeed shocked Lin Songlong. It had only been a short while since they had joined forces to go to the Black Sky Demon cult, but Chuxio's strength had already skyrocketed to such an extent. Kuang Xiewe would not have been able to block that attack just now. If it had been him, the result would probably have been the same. Looking at Lin Songlong, who was standing in front of him, Chuxio said coldly, "Lin Songlong, do you think I'm an idiot?" One was playing the good cop, while the other was playing the bad cop. Their teamwork was very good. "You said that the Elysium has no intention of becoming enemies with me. Fine, I have the intention of becoming enemies with the Elysium. Lin Songlong, I won't stop you if you want to snatch that thing, but Kuang Xiewe must die today." Lin Songlong's expression immediately changed. "Chuxio, don't be so shameless." Although Lin Songlong did not like Kuang Xiewe, and even complained that he had gone crazy and ruined things, he was still a divine general of the Elysium. In front of him, Chuxio actually wanted to kill a divine general of the Elysium. Even if Lin Songlong did not want to become enemies with Chuxio, he could not tolerate such a thing. Chu Xiu's expression was abnormally calm as he clenched the unique heavenly blade in his hand. However, everyone could see the crimson killing intent in his eyes. I gave you face, but you don't want it? It seems like you really think that I'm joking. Do you really think that I don't dare to kill someone from the Elysium? If I, Chu Xiu, want to kill someone, the only difference is whether they die sooner or later. In any case, they will all die in the end. Those who were familiar with Chu Xiu knew that Chu Xiu really wanted to kill when they saw his current appearance. At this time, it was useless for anyone to stop him. Although Chu Xiu was able to maintain his rationality most of the time, no one would be able to stop him if he were to really go crazy. Wei Shuya, who was fighting fiercely with the others, also changed his expression. He secretly sent a voice transmission to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu boy, calm down. If you want to kill the people of the Elysium, you can. When you reach the realm of the former sect leader, even if you destroy the entire Elysium and unite the East and the West Kunlun, it won't be a problem. But if you kill the people of the Elysium now, it will only bring trouble, a lot of trouble. Wei Shuya did not want Chu Xiu to show weakness. However, with Chu Xiu's current state, killing the people from the heavenly gates would not do him any good other than vent his anger. The Elysium had been in the Jianghu for such a long time. Coupled with their arrogant way of doing things, how could they not offend people? However, with the strength of the Elysium and the fact that they had no intention of interfering in the Jianghu, sometimes even if they went too far, those big forces would temporarily tolerate it. At present, for Chu Xiu and the entire diabolism, their biggest enemy was the righteous path. It was not worth it to make enemies with the people of the Elysium at this time. Elder Wei, I understand the principle of tolerating for a while, but I'm not willing to tolerate it. Moreover, taking a step back may not mean that everything will be fine. It may also mean that the other party will be insatiable. The people of the Elysium have been arrogant for such a long time because they know that everyone in the Jianghu will tolerate and give in to them. But today, I, Chu Xiu, do not want to tolerate it, nor do I want to give in. Lu Jianghe, who was at the side, used some secret method to hear the conversation between Chu Xiu and Wei Shuya. He chuckled and said, Chu Xiu's idea is not bad. It suits my temperament. Who cares about the Elysium and the underworld? A force that was almost crippled by the sect leader 500 years ago still dares to be so arrogant. When the sect leader of the Elysium was plucked off his head and kicked it like a ball, why didn't anyone dare to make an enemy of the Elysium? Wei Shuya glared at Lu Jianghe. This hall leader of the Blood Demon Hall 500 years ago was indeed as unreliable as the rumors said. Could it be compared to 500 years ago? If the Ima clan had the power of the Kunlun devil cult 500 years ago, they would not care about the entire Jianghu, let alone the Elysium. However, Wei Shuya sighed and did not try to persuade Chu Xiu again. This was Chu Xiu's character. If Chu Xiu thought so much about everything and was overcautious when doing things, no matter how talented Chu Xiu was, it would be useless. Being tough once was impulsive, but being tough 10 times was tyrannical. When you could put on an extremely tough attitude in front of everyone, you would be invincible in the world. The Kunlun devil cult in the past was like this. What was tolerance? What was apprehension? What was the big picture? Just kill them all. At this moment, Chu Xiu had already made his move. Just as he had said before, it would have been fine if Kuang Shiyue had not appeared in front of him. However, since he dared to appear in front of him and say those ridiculous words, he would send him on his way today. Without any probing or hesitation, Chu Xiu's saber slashed down. The space seemed to freeze. Everything in the path of the saber was cut in half. Even a drop of water was perfectly cut in half. The ethereal slash was unusually magnificent. It was so magnificent that it did not seem like a demonic saber at all. Everything around him condensed into a picture scroll. Under that saber intent, Lin Songlong roared angrily. A black dragon coiled around his body. In an instant, an absolute power erupted. Dragon roar to the 9 heavens. Layers of powerful black gang qi drifted out along with the dragon's roar. Finally, the picture scroll was torn apart. Lin Songlong's hands were like dragon claws as he forcefully resisted Chu Xiu's ethereal slash. However, the next moment, the gang qi on his dragon claws began to shatter. Even his internal organs were eroded by the saber intent. He could not help but groan. Kwang Shiyue, what are you still looking at, you idiot? Hurry up and make your move. Lin Songlong hated Kwang Shiyue to the core. He hated him even more than he hated Chu Xiu. If this lunatic had not followed him and caused trouble, he would have already successfully taken the heavenly key and left. Just now, Su Yun and the other big shots of the righteous path had given him face. As long as the Elysium sect did not participate in the fight between the righteous path and the demonic path, they could easily leave. In the end, Kwang Shiyue's interference had angered Chu Xiu. Now, not to mention whether they could get the heavenly key, it was still unknown whether they could stop Chu Xiu. Kwang Shiyue was indeed in a daze. To be precise, he was still in a state of shock. He seemed to be unable to accept that Chu Xiu had already grown to such a level in such a short period of time. It was a level that he could not help but be astonished. Hearing Lin Songlong's cursing, Kwang Shiyue finally reacted. Moreover, he did not argue with Lin Songlong. Instead, he hurriedly picked up the scimitar in his hand and slashed down. Moonlight bloomed in the saber radiance. It even absorbed the powerful demonic aura around it, and formed a demonic moon. It could be said that there were no weaklings among the Elysium Divine Generals. Although it was impossible for the strength of every Elysium Divine General to reach the level of Donghuang Tai or Su Yun, at the very least, their strength had to be ranked in the upper class or even the peak among warriors of the same level. However, with Chu Xiu's current strength, he was probably not far off from saying that he was the number one person below the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. As he watched the saber slash down, the demonic Buddha Dharma appeared behind Chu Xiu. The Buddhist Dharma was vast. A Buddhist seal fell, and a powerful Buddhist light suppressed everything. In an instant, it completely suppressed Kwang Shiyue's saber. The demonic might was monstrous. With a punch, endless world-extinguishing fire burned. The water of the underground river that was still flowing on the ground evaporated in an instant when it came into contact with the world-extinguishing fire. One demon and one Buddha. The two completely different powers merged into one. The power that could be produced made everyone's expression change. Kwang Shiyue formed seals with his hands. Moonlight radiated around his body as he struggled to resist the corrosion of the world-extinguishing fire. However, he could not imagine what kind of monster Chu Xiu was. It had only been a short time, and his strength had actually increased to such a level. Lin Songlong gritted his teeth. The degree of shock he felt was no less than Kwang Shiyue's. After all, he had just fought with Chu Xiu. Kwang Shiyue, if you don't want to die, then don't hold back. I will help you buy time and use your evil moon saber. Lin Songlong roared. Black dragons coiled around his body as he transformed into a dragon and charged towards Chu Xiu. Lin Songlong's martial arts were also inclined towards close combat. In particular, his dragon incarnation even had the will of a real dragon, which was very terrifying. Because the battle between Yi Xiaonan and the others had shattered the underground river in the sky, the river water had flowed down. The place where everyone was now was almost a swamp. The dragon moved through the clouds and brought down the rain. In this environment, Lin Songlong's strength had increased compared to the outside world. The black dragon crossed the sea and stepped on the boundless waves as it attacked Chu Xiu. The dragon's tail swept downwards. Everywhere it passed, even the water droplets were forcibly blasted into a cloud of mist by the powerful force. Chu Xiu's body was covered in golden and silver inner force fire. In terms of physical strength, besides Chen Qingdi and a few others, Chu Xiu was fearless. The Dharma form behind him had completely transformed into a three-eyed great black heavenly demon. Endless world-extinguishing fire bloomed, and instantly evaporated the boundless waves. The water vapor spread for several miles. It was as if one was in a thick fog, making it difficult to see one's figure clearly. With a low roar, Chu Xiu's fist landed. The inner force fire mixed with the boundless world-extinguishing fire was blasted out with the fist force of the mountain and sea fist scripture. In an instant, a dragon's roar resounded through the world. The dragon's stellar energy tail was directly shattered by Chu Xiu's fist. Lin Songlong roared angrily. His figure fell straight down amidst the encirclement of the azure dragon. His fists, palms, legs, and feet smashed towards Chu Xiu in a frenzy. Every move had the ferocity of a dragon in the wild. But every time his fists and palms collided, Chu Xiu's world-extinguishing fire would burn off a layer of his stellar energy. At the same time, his powerful strength also penetrated deep into his bones. When the last punch landed, Lin Songlong's stellar energy shield was directly shattered. His figure was blasted hundreds of feet away. He crashed into a mountain peak above the water, leaving behind a huge pit. Chapter 984. In the eyes of most people, the divine generals of the Elysium were mysterious and powerful. Moreover, to most people, the existence of the unknown was what they feared the most. Therefore, the people of the underworld were very wary of the people of the Elysium. But today, Chu Xiu had sent Lin Songlong flying with a punch. This seemed to make the others think of something. The so-called divine generals of the Elysium were only SOSO. They were very unfamiliar with the divine generals of the Elysium, but they were very familiar with Chu Xiu. Seeing the legendary divine general of the Elysium, Lin Songlong, defeated by Chu Xiu, this layer of fear and respect had long disappeared without a trace. At this moment, Lin Songlong struggled to climb out of the mountain peak. He resisted the urge to spit out blood. Purely in terms of physical strength, Chu Xiu had already surpassed him by too much. Kuang Shiyue, are you done or not? Following Lin Songlong's shout, a blood-colored crescent moon had already risen from Kuang Shiyue's side. In an instant, countless forces were attracted to it. It was as if a blood-colored moon had appeared in the pitch-black primitive demon's lair. However, Kuang Shiyue's current state was even more demonic. His entire body was shrouded in a layer of thick blood-colored mist. Within his dantian, there was a faint blood-colored glow. Upon closer inspection, it was actually a crescent moon-shaped saber. Every Elysium martialist cultivated a different cultivation technique. Before they became divine generals of the Elysium, they would use the mission rewards they had obtained in the mystic realm to exchange for various ancient cultivation techniques. Therefore, what you would achieve in the future depended entirely on you. Kuang Shiyue's original name was not Kuang Shiyue. His name actually came from an ancient murderous weapon, the evil moon saber. This ancient ominous weapon was said to be the weapon of a great figure of the demonic path in the ancient era. It was stained with countless amounts of blood and slaughter. Ordinary people were unable to use it, so the price to exchange for the evil moonblade was lower than ordinary divine weapons. However, Kuang Shiyue's brain had always been abnormal. Before he became one of the 9 great divine generals, he had actually exchanged for this evil moon saber, refined it with a secret method, and placed it in his dantian, using his own flesh and blood to feed this demonic weapon. This kind of action could be said to be crazy, because if one was not careful, it would cause a backlash. This kind of demon weapon would not recognize a master, nor would it care who it was. Kuang Shiyue had lived for so many years with a ticking time bomb that could take his life at any time. Therefore, although many of the 9 great divine generals didn't like Kuang Shiyue, few of them would really fall out with him. After all, everyone knew his background, and not many people were willing to bicker with such a lunatic. Kuang Shiyue's eyes were already dyed red with blood as he held the blood moon in his hand. You want to keep me here? This was even more absurd than a dream. When I killed you before, that was the same as killing a genius of the demonic path. But if I kill you now, I will be killing a future demonic path overlord. This sense of accomplishment will be even more satisfying than before. As Kuang Shiyue's voice fell, the blood mist around him rose even more violently. This was all formed from his own essence and blood. The huge blood moon smashed towards Chu Xiu. Everywhere it passed, everything between heaven and earth began to distort. The blood moon seemed to be able to distort and absorb anything, and could even transform it into its own power. When the blood moon smashed towards Chu Xiu and arrived in front of Chu Xiu, the blood moon had already expanded a lot. Seeing that Kuang Shiyue had finally made his move, Lin Songlong heaved a sigh of relief. However, his nerves were even more tense. He was afraid that Kuang Shiyue would become even crazier. Among the 9 great divine generals, Kuang Shiyue's strength was not the strongest. At least, Lin Songlong believed that he could completely beat Kuang Shiyue when he was in his normal state. However, this was under the premise that he could beat Kuang Shiyue when he was in his normal state, but he could not defeat the crazy Kuang Shiyue. When Kuang Shiyue went crazy, He simply did not see himself as a human. He would risk his life at every turn. No one was willing to fight with Kwang Shiyue in this state. He was willing to risk his life, but the others were not. The evil moon saber was sealed in Kwang Shiyue's dantian. This demonic saber had already affected Kwang Shiyue's mind. Once he used it, even he could not control himself. Seeing the blood moon crashing towards him, even Chu Xiu had to admit that he seemed to have underestimated the Heavenly Gate's immortal generals. Almost all of them had their own trump cards. Once they risked their lives, this kind of power was enough for Chu Xiu to pay attention to them. Of course, this was just him paying attention. The other party did not have the qualifications to make him risk his life. Facing the blood moon, Chu Xiu formed a seal with both hands. In an instant, the heaven-weeping blood rain descended. He didn't know if it was because he was in the primitive devil cave, but when Chu Xiu used the heaven and earth demon weeping great compassion mantra, it caused an extremely shocking phenomenon. The dark river in the sky began to be torn apart. Waves of ghostly wails resounded throughout the world. Although the dark river was torn apart, it did not flow backwards like before. The black river water in the dark river actually formed a huge demon that was hundreds of feet tall. It stretched half of its body down from the sky and hugged the blood moon in its arms. In the darkness, Chu Xiu even felt a whisper that sounded like a demon god's whispering. Strange scenes flashed in front of his eyes. Vengeful spirits, evil ghosts, ancient demon gods, martial artists who had stepped onto the demonic path, Buddhas who had given birth to mental demons, and all sorts of people and things were the aggregation of all sorts of negative emotions in the world. In the end, they condensed into an invisible and intangible existence. It was like a demon but not a demon, like a god but not a god. It was an existence condensed from the dark side of the world. It was invisible and intangible, but as long as there were demons, it would exist. At this moment, Chu Xiu finally understood. He understood the origin of the heaven and earth demon weeping great compassion mantra. This cultivation method should have come from the primitive devil cave. It could be said that it was formed by the heavens and earth, but it could also be said that it was written by someone. This cultivation method was the condensation of all negative emotions in the world. It was invisible and intangible, without a source or source. Unless there were no more negative emotions in the world, no more resentment, no more killing intent, then it could be eliminated. But this was impossible. Thus, in the primitive devil cave, this force grew stronger and stronger. Finally, it possessed the body of a martial artist that entered the primitive devil cave, leaving behind the heaven and earth demon weeping great compassion mantra. It no longer mattered who the other party was, because he was just a vessel. Because he was a martial artist, the great compassion mantra was a cultivation method. If the other party was a wild beast, then the great compassion mantra would be a vicious beast that brought disaster to the world. If the other party was a weapon, then the great compassion mantra would become a peerless weapon. At this time in the primitive devil cave, Chu Xiu used the complete version of the devil wailing heaven weeping great compassion mantra. This place was equivalent to the birthplace of the great compassion mantra, which was why such a phenomenon appeared. The water of the underground river condensed into a gigantic demon god, pulling the blood moon into the underground river. In an instant, a wave was set off in the underground river, but soon after, that bit of power was completely extinguished. Kwang Shiyue stood there in a daze. He didn't expect that even though he had used the power of the evil moon blade, it would still be blocked by Chu Xiu. At this time Lin Songlong roared, "Retreat! Retreat!" At this time, Lin Songlong was able to maintain absolute rationality. When Chu Xiu revealed his heaven and earth demon weeping heaven weeping great compassion mantra, Lin Songlong no longer had the intention to fight with Chu Xiu. It wasn't that Lin Songlong was afraid, but to him, there was no point in fighting to the death in such a place. Since Chu Xiu was here and he couldn't obtain the sky-through key, he would think of another way. At worst, he would lose some face and return to the heaven gate to ask for help. But who would have thought that Kwang Shiyue had already fallen into a state of paranoia and madness? It should be said that he had fallen into this state from the moment he used the evil moon blade. He swore that he would not rest until he killed Chu Xiu. With this kind of paranoia in mind, Kwang Xieyue's eyes were overflowing with killing intent. He actually reached into his abdomen and pulled out an evil scimitar that was stained with his blood. The ancient demon weapon, the evil moon blade. This blade had a great reputation in ancient times. It was basically equivalent to the status of the current demon blade, Ting Chunyu. But in Chu Xiu's opinion, although the evil moon blade was strong, it was inferior to Ting Chunyu. A blade was, after all, a weapon. It was only a good blade in the hands of a warrior. In the current Jianghu, almost everyone knew of Dugu Weiwei, but not everyone knew of the demon blade, Ting Chunyu. That was because in Dugu Weiwei's hands, Ting Chunyu was the true unparalleled demon blade. It was not like the evil moon blade, which had somewhat overshadowed its owner. Kwang Xieyue was like this at the moment. Besides his own personality, the evil moon blade had also influenced him to go all out. Holding the evil moon blade, Kwang Xieyue no longer cared about the injuries on his body. As the blade fell, a dazzling crescent moon appeared in front of everyone. It was a crescent moon formed by extreme madness. Even Yi Xiaonan, who was fighting fiercely, could not help but look back at this scene. His crescent blade was even slightly affected, and it released moonlight of its own accord. This ancient demon blade had been nurtured by Kwang Xieyue for dozens of years. With the sacrifice of his flesh and blood, its power was probably not inferior to its peak. That blade seemed to have severed space and time. Chu Xiu had a feeling that the weapon spirit on the blade had already locked onto him. This blade was born with extreme killing intent. Since Kwang Xieyue had locked onto him, this blade would not rest until he was dead. The dark primitive devil's lair was already illuminated by the bright moonlight. Chu Xiu did not dodge. He faced the blade head-on, and the ethereal slash fell. If the evil moonblade seemed to have severed time and space, then the ethereal slash's cold and bright blade light was like it had frozen time and space. Two equally bright blade lights collided. In an instant, mountains were broken and rivers were shattered. Several mountain peaks around the two exploded. The flowing underground river water was completely torn apart by that blade light. Chapter 985. Weapons were closely related to warriors. Although Chu Xiu had always believed that the strongest would always be warriors, and that weapons were always subservient, he had to admit that a sufficiently powerful weapon could sometimes turn the tide of a battle. Just like the Huangfu family patriarch, who was about to be buried, he was able to fight a few rounds with Chu Xiu using the demon spear crimson handle. However, the one holding the evil moonblade was not the Huangfu family patriarch, but divine general Kwang Xieyue. It had to be said that this attack had exceeded Chu Xiu's expectations. He glanced at the unique heavenly blade in his hand, and saw that there was another nick on it. The heavenly war case was a divine weapon that was compatible with the black tortoise true technique. It was very flexible, but its sharpness was far from enough. When it clashed with the crimson handle previously, there was already a nick on the unique heavenly blade, and it was unable to change into other forms. If this happened a few more times, the entire heavenly war case would probably break. Of course, this was not important. Chu Xiu was confident that he could take down Kwang Xieyue before the heavenly war case broke. When a person had fallen to the extent that he was controlled by his weapon, how could he still control his own fate? Given Kwang Xieyue's current state, he would not be able to hold on for long before the evil moon blade completely drained his blood. However, Kwang Xieyue did not think about this at all. His mind was already filled with killing intent. Even when Lin Songlong shouted for him to retreat, he did not seem to hear it. The evil moon blade blossomed with a soaring sharpness. The seemingly resplendent moonlight contained endless blood, and the roars of vengeful spirits. Behind Chu Xiu, the Mahakala demon god Dharma idol condensed, and an endless amount of apocalyptic flames roared out. Strangely enough, even the apocalyptic flames, which could burn everything, were sliced into two by the sharpness of the evil moon blade. Chu Xiu blocked the attack without any expression on his face. Even though there would be a gap in his unique heavenly blade with every strike, and even he was pushed back more than 30 meters, he could feel Kwang Xieyue's vitality weakening with every strike. Just then, in Chu Xiu's mind, the mental demon that he had trapped suddenly said, "How about we make a deal? Let me out, and I'll help you deal with him. If you continue to fight like this, The divine weapon in your hand will be crippled. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "It's just a divine weapon. I can afford to lose it. I have countless ways to get rid of him, but this is the one that consumes the least energy. A saber in exchange for the life of an Elysium divine general. It's worth it." This heart demon was incomparably strange. Although its thoughts were different from a human's, its ability to think was stronger than some people's. The illusions it created could not be said to be invulnerable, but they could be considered to be perfect. Even a heaven and earth profound understanding expert would be easily trapped within them. Chu Xiu had only brought it out to find a chance to study this thing, and see if it could be of any use. Making a deal with it was simply a joke. The inner demon in Chu Xiu's mind laughed and said, "But if I make a move, you can get rid of him now. You won't even need to cripple your saber. I know you're guarding against me, but you don't have to worry. Most of my power is left in the valley. Now that I only have this little bit of power left, I can't threaten you at all. How about this? You don't need to let me out. You just need to open a hole in your mental strength, and let me transfer my power to your saber. I'll temporarily replace the weapon spirit, and I'll help you get rid of him soon. What do you think?" Chu Xiu did not agree to it directly. Instead he asked, "Why do you insist on making a move? Do you want to devour his inner demon?" The inner demon said, "This is only one of the reasons. I've been here for so many years and have devoured countless inner demons. There are also many who are stronger than him. What I'm really curious about is what he's like inside. In the eyes of you humans, the world is divided into black and white, and there are good and bad. But in my eyes, there's no such thing. I'm more curious about why these people turn from white to black, from good to bad. He's a madman. I can feel that his mental state is extremely unstable. This is not caused by that saber. So I'm very curious about why he became like this." The inner demon was not a human, so Chu Xiu could not understand its strange thinking. However, it was worth it if he could get rid of Kuang Shiyue quickly. Moreover, as the inner demon had said, Chu Xiu was not afraid of it playing any tricks. Most of the inner demon's power was in the valley. With the current spiritual force and the real fire of internal force, Chu Xiu could completely suppress it. When Kuang Shiyue's saber slashed again, Chu Xiu had already attached the power of the inner demon to the peerless heavenly saber. The next moment, the saber slashed down. A powerful collision exploded, but Kuang Shiyue's eyes showed a trace of confusion. Eastern Qi Yusheng Street, Great Liang City. This was the biggest brothel in Great Liang City. At this time, Kuang Shiyue was only a 15 or 16-year-old gangster. He looked around the street like a thief to see if there were any fat sheep. He was a pickpocket. To be precise, he was a low-level pickpocket. He only dared to steal from foreigners because he had no backing. If he stole from someone he could not afford to offend, his legs would be broken. Moreover, he was not called Kuang Shiyue but Kuang Shower. He did not know what his real name was. He only knew that his surname was Kuang before he was abandoned by his parents. He had been a waiter in a tea house for a while, so that became his name. Kuang Shiyue scratched his head. He did not know why he could not lift his spirits today, but it did not matter. His goal of stealing one tael of silver had been achieved. He tiptoed to the back door of the biggest brothel in Yusheng Street, Huaihua House. Kuang Shiyue whistled twice, imitating the sound of a partridge. But there was no movement for a long time. Kuang Shiyue was puzzled. What was going on today? At this moment, the back door was opened. A pretty girl, who was about the same age as Kuang Shiyue, appeared in front of him. Seeing the girl, Kuang Shiyue immediately greeted her with a happy face. "Little Red, why did you open the door so late? I stole 3 taels of silver today. Don't worry, I'll be able to help you redeem your freedom in a year's time." Kuang Shiyue was so happy that he did not notice that Little Red looked like she was about to cry. At this moment, a pair of big hands suddenly grabbed his neck and slammed him against the wall. In an instant, Kuang Shiyue's head was already bleeding. "Little brat, you actually dare to come and seduce my people? Are you tired of living?" A voluptuous madam stood behind the door. She looked at Kuang Shiyue, who had been picked up by a big man. She said disdainfully, "A lowly thief. Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself in the mirror? How dare you come to Huaihua House to steal someone? A toad like you will never be able to eat swan meat in your entire life. I have already sold Xiaohong's wedding day to Lord Zheng for 1,000 taels of silver. Fortunately, you haven't ruined Xiaohong's body. Otherwise, who will pay for my losses? At this moment, a middle-aged man in silk clothes, as fat as a pig, came over and took Little Red into his arms. Amidst Little Red's screams, he chewed and laughed. Mother Wang, what are you talking about? I, Zheng, am a man of my word. I said 1,000 taels of silver, so it is 1,000 taels of silver. At worst, Little Red will stay with me for a few more nights. I am not picky about food. Let go of her, let go of her. Kuang Xieyue struggled in the big man's hands. But he was so young. How could he break free from the strong brothel thugs? Mother Wang said disdainfully. Beat him up and throw him out. Remember, don't kill him. If you kill him, you will have to give money to those guys in the government. After a quarter of an hour, Kuang Xieyue, who was beaten to death, was thrown onto the street. Compared to the injuries on his body, what hurt more was his heart. Why did he not have money? Why did he not have power? Why? At this moment, there was the sound of footsteps. Kuang Xieyue struggled to raise his head, but he could only see a pair of luxurious purple boots, gilded with dragons. You are not reconciled? You want power? Yes. Kuang Xieyue wanted to say a lot of things, but in the end he only squeezed out one word. Okay. The man also replied with one word. From then on, Kuang Xieyue was brought into the heavenly gate. He cultivated crazily. He had no friends, no brothers, only cruel competition and killing. He had no talent. His potential was not as good as Lin Songlong's. He was not even as good as Immortal Luo's. He only had one advantage, which was that he dared to risk his life. Others were cultivating, but he was risking his life. He knew that merging with the evil moon saber would be harmful, but there was only one benefit. For this benefit he still did it. Therefore, those who were stronger than him died in the secret realm of the Heavenly Gate, and he became the immortal general of the Heavenly Gate. When he had everything he wanted, when he returned to Great Liang City and flourishing Moon Street, he killed those who had humiliated him in the past. Even though some of them had died of old age, he still slaughtered their entire families. He saw Little Red, but the Little Red from back then was already dead. The one who was alive was the new madam of Huaihua House, Mama Red. Little Red, who was forced to sell herself, became the one who forced others to sell themselves. Kuang Xieyue killed her. He could not bear to see the person he loved become like this. But before she died, she saw Kuang Xieyue's face, which he had deliberately covered up. She smiled and said, "Brother, little heir." No, Kuang Xieyue roared. In an instant the whole street was destroyed. Even the people of the Eastern Qi royal family were alarmed. At this moment, his heart felt like it had died. He looked down and saw that there was a long saber stuck in his chest. Flourishing Moon Street disappeared. What appeared in front of him was only blood. The other end of the long saber was in Chu Xiu's hand. He said lightly, "You are very pitiful. From the moment you killed her, little heir Kuang was already dead. The only one left alive is a madman named Kuang Xieyue. You are living in so much pain. Killing you is also a kind of release for you." The long saber was pulled out, and Kuang Xieyue's life instantly disappeared. But at this moment, there was no hatred on his face. There was only a look of relief. "Little Red, I am coming for you." Chapter 986. The inner demon was right. No one was born crazy, and no one was born evil or good. Chu Xiu could see all of Kuang Xieyue's experiences in the illusion. For an existence like the inner demon, who had once created an illusion that could confuse metaphysic realm experts, it was very easy to confuse someone like Kuang Xieyue, who had a huge flaw in his mental state. Even the changes in his mental state could not be hidden from the inner demon and Chu Xiu. That was why Chu Xiu had said that Kuang Xieyue was very pitiful. However, everyone in this world suffered. Who was not pitiful? Who was not worthy of sympathy? Chu Xiu's heart was as hard as iron. He would kill if he was pitiful, and he would kill if he was sympathetic. However, at this moment, everyone was stunned as they watched Chu Xiu stab Kuang Xieyue to death, including Lin Songlong. He had not made a move earlier, not because he did not want to save Kwang Shiyue, but because he was thinking of a way to pull Kwang Shiyue back, so that he would not be sent to his death. They were both Elysium Divine Generals, and Lin Songlong knew Kwang Shiyue's strength. Under the premise of using the evil moon blade, Kwang Shiyue could at least hold on for a while. However, who would have thought that Kwang Shiyue would be stabbed to death by Chu Xiu just like that? This blade was simply inexplicable. The illusion created by the inner demon was very long. So long that Kwang Shiyue could remember his most painful period. However, in the outside world it was only a moment. In that moment, Kwang Shiyue's mental defense was completely broken, and he was stabbed to death by Chu Xiu without any resistance. Pointing at Chu Xiu, Lin Songlong's eyes were filled with anger and disbelief. He, Chu Xiu, had actually dared to kill Elysium Divine General. However, Lin Songlong was not stupid enough to seek revenge on Chu Xiu at this time. He was stronger than the normal Kwang Shiyue, but not stronger than the crazy Kwang Shiyue, who had used the evil moon blade. Even in this state, Kwang Shiyue had been killed by Chu Xiu. Right now, he could only return to the Elysium Divine General and report to the Divine General. Seeing Lin Songlong flee, Chu Xiu did not give chase. There were many more important things at hand than Lin Songlong. As for the enmity between him and the Elysium, it was not something that could be resolved by killing Lin Songlong. There were so many people watching. Chu Xiu placed his hand on the evil moon saber. Instantly, the evil moon saber emitted a feeling of resistance. A frenzied massacre intent continued to affect Chu Xiu. This saber was a demonic weapon among demonic weapons. At the same time that it was powerful, the artifact's spirit had started to overtake its master and affect its user. Even the current Chu Xiu couldn't suppress it. Therefore, Chu Xiu directly threw it into the secret space box. However, no one noticed that there was a glimmer of light coming from Kwang Shiyue's corpse. At the same time, far away in the Elysium Divine General of West Kunlun, in the dim main hall, one of the 9 strangely shaped dragon-shaped candles suddenly went out. The next moment, a man in a black robe with red hair appeared in the main hall. He stared at the extinguished candle and suddenly said, "Kwang Shiyue is dead." The man in the black robe with red hair was the Divine General, Jun Wushan. However, when he learned that Kwang Shiyue was dead, he did not feel the slightest bit of sadness or anger. It was as if this sentence was just a statement. At this moment, another figure appeared in the main hall. It was an old man in a dragon-embroidered robe. On his feet was a pair of purple gold boots with dragons embroidered on them. They were very luxurious. He was tall and mighty, with a lion's nose and tiger's eyes. Just by standing there, he gave people a feeling that he was not angry. Kwang Shiyue is dead? Someone actually dared to kill a divine general of Elysium. The old man's voice was like the roar of thunder, causing the entire hall to rumble. Jun Wushan said expressionlessly, "A divine general of Elysium is also a human. There are many who dare to kill a divine general of Elysium." The old man snorted coldly and said, "Don't worry, master. Find someone to temporarily replace my seal. 3 months. No. I will bring that person's head back in 2 months." Jun Wushan shook his head and said, "No need. I will go personally. Activate the infinite universe formation, and directly send me to Kwang Shiyue. He should not have left yet. There are many who can kill a divine general of Elysium in this Jianghu. However, how many of them can still live after killing a divine general of Elysium?" The old man was surprised and said, "But master, once the infinite universe formation is activated, it will affect the seal. Let me go. You don't have to worry about such a small matter. Sigh, it's a pity for Kwang Shiyue. He was the one I thought most highly of. It's a pity that he lost control of his mind and destroyed himself. Even if he is not killed this time, he will not be able to keep his position if he goes crazy again during the next Divine General ranking." Jun Wushan did not agree or refute. He just looked at the old man and said again, "Activate the infinite universe formation." The old man opened his mouth, but did not say another word. He could only sigh and control the complicated formation in the hall. In the next moment, a powerful wave directly surged into the hall. The void was torn, and a black crack appeared. Jun Wushan stepped into it. When the crack disappeared, the old man sighed. What an eventful time. At this moment, in Liaodong County in the north, next to a small village not far from the northern fluttering snow city, a figure in white walked in the heavy snow. It was clearly a cold winter snow outside, but the area around him was as warm as spring. Wherever he walked, the ice and snow melted, and there were even sprouts that broke through the ground. However, as he walked away, the sprouts withered in an instant, and were covered by the snow in the blink of an eye. In an instant, the withering and flourishing of the 4 seasons replayed under his feet. The figure in white looked like a young man in his 20s. His hair was loose, and there was a thin red mark on his forehead. It looked like a closed vertical eye. He was obviously a young man, but there was an indescribable temperament on him. He was not old, but the vicissitudes of life brought about by the passage of time. In an instant, the world changed into mulberry fields. Compared to the desolate and uninhabited north, although Liaodong County was covered in snow most of the year, there were still ordinary people living in it. This small village was one of them. At this moment, a child about 7 or 8 years old was making a snowman outside the village. He was wrapped in layers of cotton clothes and was as round as a little bear. The young man walked to the side of the child, bent down and asked, "Excuse me, is that the north?" The child was shrouded in a warm feeling, and was not afraid at all. He pointed in a direction and said crisply, "That way." "Thank you." The young man touched the child's head. In an instant, a faint light had already entered the child's body. If someone were to examine the child's body at this moment, they would be shocked to find that although the child was young, the meridians in his body were extremely clear. If he practiced martial arts, there would be no hindrance in the circulation of his inner strength. He was definitely a genius among geniuses. Of course, the child naturally did not know about this. The young man stood up and took a step forward. He had already disappeared in front of the child's eyes. This immediately made the child's mouth open in shock. Wiping away his snot, the child turned back and shouted towards the village, "Mother, come out and see the god." A roar that sounded like the 9 transformation lion roar of the Great Light Temple came from the village. "I think you look like a god. Little brat, why aren't you scurrying back to eat? If you don't come back, I'll give you a good spanking." At this time in the primitive demon's cave, most people were still in a state of shock. They were shocked that Chu Xiu had actually stabbed an Elysium divine general to death. But at this moment, there was a shocking fluctuation in the void. The space was being torn apart layer by layer. Everyone looked over there in shock. They even thought that the primitive demon's cave was about to collapse. They were all prepared to snatch the treasure and escape at any time. But as the space was torn apart layer by layer, it actually formed a door. A figure in a black robe with red hair walked out from it. Everyone present was stunned. Obviously, no one could recognize who this person was. Only Senior Qing, who had not made a move all this time, suddenly stood up straight. His eyes were filled with shock. Why would he appear here? At this time Lin Songlong, who had already escaped far away, sensed the aura. He immediately ran back as fast as he could and shouted in surprise, "Master! Why are you here?" Hearing Lin Songlong call him that, everyone present immediately knew who the person in front of them was. Number 4 on the sovereign list, Elysium Master Jun Wuxian. This legendary existence, even among the few heaven and earth profound understanding existences present, no one had ever dealt with him before. Yi Xiaonan stared at Jun Wuxian. No one knew what he was thinking. The number 1 demonic cultivator in the world almost stood at the peak of the underworld. But he was suppressed by 2 legendary existences. Perhaps he was thinking, how far apart was he from Jun Wuxian? Jun Wuxian also subconsciously looked at Yi Xiaonan. It should be said that only Yi Xiaonan was worthy of his attention. But in the next moment, Jun Wuxian turned his gaze away and with a slap, he sent Lin Songlong's entire body flying into a mountain peak. Lin Songlong struggled to climb out, and immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. This slap was more serious than the injury he had suffered when he fought with Chu Xiu. Jun Wuxian did not scold him. There was no anger on his face. He just asked lightly, "Who killed Kuang Shiyue?" Lin Songlong coughed and spat out another mouthful of blood. But there was no expression on his face. It was as if being slapped by Jun Wuxian was natural. Lin Songlong pointed at Chu Xiu and said, "It was Chu Xiu." Kuang Xieyue died in the hands of Chu Xiu, and the demonic moonblade was also taken by him. At this moment, everyone present immediately turned to look at Chu Xiu. Some were surprised, some were gloating, and some were worried. Everyone knew that Chu Xiu had killed the Elysium Divine General, and this matter would not end so easily. But even the people present did not expect that retribution would come so quickly. Chapter 987. No one had expected Jun Wuxian's sudden appearance. Chu Xiu had not expected Jun Wuxian, who was thousands of miles away and still on Mount Kunlun, to appear here. This time, Chu Xiu had indeed miscalculated. He wasn't a god, so he couldn't predict everything. Not to mention, he couldn't predict how the other party would appear in front of him as soon as he killed someone. No one could predict this. Moreover, according to the understanding of the people of Jianghu, every time they appeared in Jianghu, there should be a purpose. Moreover, there was a time limit for the Divine General of Elysium to leave Elysium. In the end, who would have thought that because Kuang Xieyue was killed, the Master of Elysium, who had barely appeared in Jianghu, would come in person? At that moment, Chu Xiu had simulated it countless times in his mind. This time, he was afraid that he would really be in danger. There was no other way but to fight, because his opponent was Jun Wuxian, the Master of Elysium. In the face of absolute power, all schemes were useless. Chu Xiu's mental energy had already seeped into the secret space box. He was ready to use the Blood Demon transformation skill, and use the evil Moonblade. At the same time, Chu Xiu looked at Shang Tianliang. His meaning was obvious. If I die, the rest of the people from Merchant City will have to eat sand for the rest of their lives in Emerald City. Without Shang Tianliang's protection, the resources that Chu Xiu gave them would be used up. They would be worse off than before. Feeling Chu Xiu's gaze, Shang Tianliang could not help but want to curse. In the past, Chu Xiu had used him as a fighter. The opponents that Chu Xiu had found for him were slightly more troublesome, but he could still deal with them. Even if Su Xiai and Rama came, he could at least exchange a few blows with them. But now, what kind of monster did Chu Xiu find for him? Feeling the invisible aura from Jun Wuxian, even Shang Tianliang could not help but tremble. How was he going to fight? At that moment, Jun Wuxian was also staring at Chu Xiu. He vaguely remembered this name. It seemed that he had a feud with Kuang Xieyue last time. However, all of this was no longer important. He did not care about Chu Xiu's identity, nor did he care about Chu Xiu's strength. Killing a divine general of the Elysium meant paying with his life. It was that simple. The Elysium did not need to consider too much, nor did they need to fear anyone. Hence, after locking onto Chu Xiu, Jun Wuxian did not even say a word and immediately attacked. Just when Chu Xiu was ready to fight with his life on the line, another aura barged into the tense atmosphere and instantly diluted the aura. A white-robed young man stepped through the air. Wherever he went, the demonic energy that had gathered in the primitive demon cave for millions of years would dissipate. It was as if he could only accept the power of his subordinates. The moment he saw this person, Jun Wuxian's expressionless face suddenly twitched. His originally emotionless eyes revealed an extremely complicated expression. Zhongshenxiu. When Jun Wuxian spat out these three words, the crowd immediately burst into an uproar. Third on the sovereign list. Of course, before news of Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji arrived, he was actually the world's #1. The legendary Sky Lord of the Mahasvara, Zhongshenxiu. There was no past, no future. From the moment he appeared, he was the world's #1. At this moment, everyone could not remain calm. What day was it today that these two legendary existences actually appeared here at the same time? Jun Wuxian, you promised me that you would not leave the Elysium for 300 years. Now you have broken the promise. Zhongshenxiu spoke slowly. His tone was neither fast nor slow, neither sad nor happy. Jun Wuxian said expressionlessly, I came out of the Elysium to kill. My divine general died outside. You have broken the promise. Jun Wuxian's face was a little twisted. I said that I am only here to kill. After I kill him, I will return to the Elysium without delay. Could it be that my divine general was killed outside? And as the Lord of the Elysium, I turn a blind eye to it? Zhong Shenxiu still spoke in that unhurried tone. You have broken the promise. Zhong Shenxiu. Jun Wuxian roared. The surrounding space distorted, and there was a faint flame wandering in it. Lin Songlong was stunned. How many years had it been? He had never seen such an expression on the Lord's face. It could even be said that it was the first time he had seen the Lord so angry. Sigh. Zhong Shenxiu let out a soft sigh. With a raise of his hand, the underground river in the sky that had already healed was torn apart in an instant. The monstrous water of the underground river rushed down and gathered in Zhong Shenxiu's hand, turning into a giant sword 10,000 feet long. Jun Wuxian's eyes shone with endless brilliance. At this moment, the space around him began to distort layer by layer. 6 huge vortexes appeared around him, enveloping the giant sword. From the 6 vortexes came bursts of strange auras. Some were as holy as gods, some were gloomy and evil, and one could even vaguely hear the wailing of hungry ghosts. Seeing this scene, Lin Songlong's expression suddenly changed. 6 paths of Buddha's disillusionment brilliance wheel. In order to cultivate this secret technique, the Lord had even plunged his 7 emotions and 6 desires into the 6 paths of reincarnation in the illusory mystic realm to temper them. If one of his emotions collapsed, he would immediately lose control of his state of mind and become a complete lunatic. This technique was something that the previous lords of the Elysium had not chosen to cultivate, but Jun Wuxian had succeeded in cultivating it. However, since the day of his success, he had not used it even once. But now, facing Zhong Shenxiu, Jun Wuxian had actually used all his strength in his trump card. Under the 6 paths of Buddha's disillusionment brilliance wheel, the giant sword was forcefully crushed and turned into a pool of water mist. But in the boundless water mist, Zhong Shenxiu gently took a step forward. The boundless water mist condensed into a huge figure, hazy and resplendent, like a celestial being. But looking at the figure, it seemed to be Zhong Shenxiu himself. The huge figure pointed a finger down, and with a seemingly light finger, Jun Wuxian's 6 paths of Buddha's disillusionment brilliance will began to shatter. The 6 paths collapsed and the space was torn apart. In an instant, the entire primitive devil cave began to tremble, and in the next moment, the wheel was completely extinguished. Jun Wuxian took 3 steps back, his face expressionless, but the divine light in his eyes did not dissipate, and was still flickering. Zhong Shenxiu waved his hand, and the sky-piercing key with the demonic patterns directly passed through the surrounding natural array formation, and mysteriously fell into Zhong Shenxiu's hand. Even the array formation was not damaged in the slightest. This thing, I want it. Jun Wuxian looked at Zhong Shenxiu expressionlessly. After a moment, he waved his hand, and the portal that he had just appeared from appeared again. Jun Wuxian directly carried Lin Songlong and entered the portal. When Jun Wuxian left, Chu Xiu's side also immediately breathed a sigh of relief. To be honest, it wasn't just Chu Xiu who was confused by this series of events. Almost everyone present could be said to have no idea what was going on. They only knew one thing, and that was that the waters of the pugilistic world were truly unfathomable. Previously, they thought that Yi Xiaonan was at the peak of the pugilistic world. They didn't expect that these 2 legendary existences simply stood at the peak of the peak. Whether it was Jun Wuxian or Zhong Shenxiu, almost no one understood what had happened. Perhaps only Yi Xiaonan understood a little. At this time, Zhong Shenxiu held the sky-piercing key with the demonic patterns in his hand, and felt everyone's eyes on him. He waved his hand and said, "You guys continue." After saying that, Zhong Shenxiu took a step forward, and his figure disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. There was a moment of silence, but in the next moment, Yi Xiaonan's powerful aura erupted like a volcano. Heaven and earth reversal, one hand mending the heavens. The powerful power of the Heaven-Mending Heart Sutra was exerted to the extreme by Yi Xiaonan in an instant. In the blink of an eye, the water of the underground river was torn apart, causing it to flow backwards once again. Moreover, Yi Xiaonan's moon blade slashed down, as if it had passed through space. One moment he was still fighting against the Sword Hut's myriad sword catalog, and the next moment he appeared on the peak of the dragon vein. With a loud bang, the blade slashed down, and the power of the demonic dragon's dragon vein erupted in an instant. The power was earth-shattering, causing the entire primitive devil cave to tremble. The expressions of everyone present changed. Was Yi Xiaonan provoked by Jun Wuxian and Zhong Xinxiu? Was he crazy? Seeing this scene, Chu Xiu didn't hesitate. He directly said in a deep voice, "Do it." The array on the demonic dragon's dragon vein had been cut open. It was time to see who would get the demonic seed and the demonic blade. At the same time, Senior Qing of the Celestial Master Mansion, who hadn't moved before, also moved. He had always said that he was an old man, that he always came out with a walking stick, and that he looked like he was going to die soon. But when it came to the real deal, this person's movements were more agile than anyone else's. Endless lightning surrounded Senior Qing. At this moment, his originally stooped back instantly straightened. He held the thunder in his hand, and a thunder god Dharma idol condensed behind him. With a slap, the purple heaven divine thunder instantly exploded, and Sheng Beixian, who was in front of him, was slapped away. Although Sheng Beixian was a slippery person, he still had strength. In the entire demonic lineage, he was also considered a figure. But in the end, he was slapped away dozens of feet. He was completely dumbfounded. What was going on? On the other side, Dong Huangtai used the burning sky treasure mirror to the extreme. Even the sky full of flames was mixed with a trace of blood. He was burning his own blood essence. Sect leader, seize the demonic seed. When a powerhouse at the level of Dong Huangtai burned his blood essence and attacked with all his might, even existences in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth had to take it seriously. For the sake of this demonic seed, everyone in moon-worshipping cult was really putting their lives on the line. They had the posture of killing gods and Buddhas who stood in their way. Chapter 988. Moon-worshipping cult began to go all out. It should be said that all of the bright demon lineage in West Chu were going all out. They were different from sects that liked to play petty tricks like the evil pole sect. In the entire West Chu, all of the bright demon lineage sects respected moon-worshipping cult. Both sides would suffer and prosper together. As long as they helped Yi Xiaonan obtain the demon seed, would they need to worry about not getting any benefits? The sect master of the five poison sect, Yi Saihua, even took out all of the goo insects and poisonous creatures that she had refined. That power was also very shocking. With Dong Huangtai going all out, and the other bright demon lineage martial artists going all out, Yi Xiaonan's body shone with astral energy. With one hand, he mended the sky and cracked the earth. The endless water of the underground river turned into a waterspout that swept through the world. The power of the world was simply terrifying. With one move, Luo Mo and the others were forced back. Yi Xiaonan reached out, and from the waterspout, a huge demon hand reached out and directly grabbed the demon seed. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression changed. The demon seed had fallen into Yi Xiaonan's hands. The hope of getting it back was almost zero. At this time, Chu Xiu glared at Shang Tianliang, meaning to look at him, and then at you. Dong Huangtai was willing to burn his blood essence for Yi Xiaonan, so couldn't you do a little more? Although Chu Xiu could find many people as loyal as Dong Huangtai, they weren't strong enough. Those who were strong, like Shang Tianliang, wouldn't risk their lives for him. So Shang Tianliang glared back at Chu Xiu without hesitation. You found so many troublesome opponents for I, and now you want I to burn my blood essence to help you? Dream on. If Shang Tianliang didn't want to risk his life, then Chu Xiu would have to do it himself. From the beginning, Chu Xiu's goal wasn't the demon seed. Since Yi Xiaonan had already come, Chu Xiu knew his limits. He didn't want to fight with Yi Xiaonan for the demon seed. Therefore, he could only take a step back and fight for the stone saber. At this moment, the mental demon in Chu Xiu's mind suddenly said, "The weapon spirit on the saber you snatched earlier is very violent. If you attach me to the saber, I can temporarily suppress the weapon spirit for a period of time." This time, Chu Xiu was stunned by the inner demon's words. Just now, Chu Xiu had indeed relied on this inner demon to deal with Kuang Xieyue so quickly. But now, this inner demon had taken the initiative to help him. What was it planning? In Chu Xiu's mind, the inner demon took the form of a human. It shrugged and said, "I'm trapped now. it's going to be very difficult for me to escape. According to the way you humans do things, especially a greedy human like you will definitely use all kinds of methods to study me and bring out my greatest value. Instead of that, I might as well show my value now and save myself from suffering. This way, everyone will be better, right? Chu Xiu looked at the inner demon in surprise. This thing was indeed the incarnation of the darkest existence in the human heart. Its control over the human heart had reached a very deep level. It was right. If Chu Xiu couldn't figure out its use, then Chu Xiu would throw this inner demon to Master Yuanji or Feng Buping to study. As for whether it would eventually die or survive, it was not Chu Xiu's business. However, since it had said so, Chu Xiu directly asked, "How long can you suppress the evil moon saber's weapon spirit?" The inner demon said, "My power mainly lies in breaking through the human heart's defense and building an illusion. To deal with the weapon spirit, I can only use the simplest power to suppress it. I estimate that I can only do it for a quarter of an hour." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "A quarter of an hour is enough." As soon as his voice fell, in an instant, Chu Xiu's body bloomed with a dazzling red blood qi. It even stimulated the powerful demonic energy in the primitive demon's cave. In an instant, the sky changed color. The blood demon transformation technique was displayed. In an instant, Chu Xiu's power skyrocketed. It had even risen to the level of a heaven and earth mystic enlightenment powerhouse. Lu Jianghe's brows suddenly jumped. Again. It had to be known that he was the one who created the blood demon transformation technique. In the end, he didn't even use it once. It was all used by Chu Xiu. It could even be said that as the creator of this secret technique, his understanding of it might not be as good as Chu Xiu's. Lu Jianghe couldn't help but curl his lips. With the sect master's indestructible demon pill, he could be willful. If he had the indestructible demon pill, then he would have dared to bare his teeth at that old Taoist Ning Xuanji. The moment Chu Xiu's strength erupted, the others had already noticed it. Su Ci, who was the closest to Chu Xiu, pressed his palms together. Buddha light filled the skies and a resplendent Buddha kingdom fell down, illuminating the primitive demon's cave with a holy and glorious feeling. Moreover, it wasn't just Su Ci. Countless righteous path martial artists also came forward to intercept Chu Xiu. Only 3 things were bred from the primitive demon's cave's dragon vein. The strange stone was taken away by Zhong Xinxiu, and the demon seed ultimately fell into Yi Xiaonan's hands. And finally, if the strange blade-like stone was obtained by Chu Xiu, then the righteous path martial artists would have come to primitive demon's cave in vain. Facing so many powerhouses attacking together, it was unknown when Chu Xiu had replaced the peerless heavenly blade with the evil moon blade. The powerful and crazy aura of the blade had just begun to attack Chu Xiu when it was completely suppressed by his heart demons. In an instant, the evil moon blade in Chu Xiu's hand shined with a bright and evil blood-red moonlight. For a quarter of an hour, Chu Xiu could completely control this ominous weapon from ancient times. Chu Xiu closed his eyes, and the saber attack that Dugu Weiwa had unleashed in the blood-red lotus's illusory realm appeared before his eyes once again. This time, Chu Xiu seemed to understand some of the saber intent within it. In truth, there was only one word in that saber intent: break. The word break was like a blade that could cut through stone, destroying everything in its path. There was no existence that could stop this break saber. This could be called an extreme saber intent. In truth, it was the most simple truth of the saber path. The great Tao was simple. When Dugu Weiwei slashed out with this saber, he had already returned to his true self. As he slashed out with the word break, there was no existence that could stop him. Now Chu Xiu had exchanged the blood demon heaven transformation art for extreme strength, and the ancient ominous weapon, evil moon, for extreme sharpness. As he slashed out with this break saber once more, his strength and even his state of mind were 30% similar to Dugu Weiwei's. Although it was only 30%, it was enough. As the blade slashed down, everything seemed to be sliced into 2 halves in an instant. Time was cut apart, space was cut apart, and the universe was cut in half. Time seemed to come to a standstill for a moment. In the next moment, the tens of thousands of Buddhist kingdoms that Su Ci had created completely collapsed. As for the other righteous path martial artists that stood in front of Chu Xiu, the stronger ones had their offensive completely cut off by Chu Xiu. As for the weaker ones, the saber intent entered their bodies, causing them to vomit blood and fly away. As for the weaker ones, they were directly cut in half by this saber. The strangest thing was that no matter what posture they took, they were all cut in half from the point between their eyebrows. The power of this saber could no longer be described with words. And Chu Xiu took advantage of the power of this saber. Ignoring his burning blood vitality, his figure turned into a blood-red light as he directly arrived in front of the dragon vein, and took the stone saber into his robes. All the righteous path martial artists present revealed a trace of unwillingness. They had come here to prevent the demonic path martial artists from obtaining the supreme treasures of the primitive demon cave. But now they had failed to obtain any of the 3 treasures they had set out to obtain, and 2 of them were in the hands of the demonic path martial artists. To them, this was a complete and utter defeat. However, the demon seed had fallen into Yi Xiaonan's hands. They didn't dare to snatch it, nor could they. But this wasn't necessarily the case for Chu Xiu. Although the power of his saber just now was astonishing, no one present was mediocre. They could almost instantly guess that Chu Xiu must have paid a certain price to use such a powerful saber strike. It wouldn't last for long. But before they could attack, the entire primitive demon cave began to shake. Cracks began to appear in the underground river above everyone's heads. Some sort of law began to disappear, and in an instant, the water of the underground river began to flow downwards. In an instant, everyone found themselves in a monstrous flood. This time, the water of the underground river was not broken by everyone, and some of the laws of heaven and earth were losing effect. This should be related to the damage to the dragon vein. Last time, even though Dugu Weiwa had also come here and obtained the things inside, he did not destroy the dragon vein. Thus, it took 500 years for the demon seed and other things to be born. This time, Yi Xiaonan was ruthless. His saber had severely damaged the foundation of the dragon vein. And then Chu Xiu took the stone saber. His actions were not gentle, so in this way, the dragon vein completely collapsed. And it also caused the entire primitive demon cave to change color. No matter how strong a human was, it couldn't be stronger than the power of heaven and earth. After the primitive demon cave began to collapse, everyone had no intention of snatching anything else. They all fled frantically to the exit. Chu Xiu also retracted the blood demon transformation technique and shouted, "Retreat!" Everyone followed Chu Xiu and fled to the exit. Fortunately, everyone present was relatively strong, especially on Chu Xiu's side. There wasn't even a real pellet state, so they escaped smoothly. After escaping outside, Chu Xiu suddenly gasped, and his face was slightly pale. The power of the blood demon transformation technique was amazing, but it also consumed a lot of vitality. Even if Chu Xiu only maintained one saber just now, he had consumed a lot of vitality at this time. If he didn't have the eternal demon pill, he might even be seriously injured on the spot. I don't know what Lu Jianghe, that timid guy, was thinking at the beginning. He almost never fought with others, but he actually developed this kind of means that he would only use when fighting to the end. At this time, Lu Jianghe suddenly looked at Chu Xiu as if he felt that Chu Xiu was slandering him, but he was glared back by Chu Xiu. Chapter 989. The righteous path and fiend path cultivators fled the primitive demon cave in a panic. But this time, they no longer had the strength to cause trouble for Chu Xiu. Some of the righteous path cultivators who were too slow were buried in the primitive demon cave. The might of heaven and earth was not something a human could resist. At this time, they discovered that another group of people had escaped as well. They were Si Wuya, Yuan Guang, and the others who were trapped in the deep pool. The deep pool was a branch of the demonic dragon vein. When Yi Xiaonan injured the dragon vein automatically drew power from those branches. Hence, the power of the deep pool had weakened. When the dragon vein collapsed, the power that bound them disappeared, and they regained their freedom. The righteous path cultivators were overjoyed to see their patriarch from 800 years ago. However, the fiend path cultivators' atmosphere was not so harmonious. Si Wuya and the others looked at Chu Xiu with unfriendly eyes. They clearly had a chance to leave, but this fiend path cultivator refused to let them go. He even spoke rudely. If it weren't for the accident in the primitive demon cave, they might not have been able to leave in this lifetime. However, Si Wuya and the others did not say anything. When they were trapped in the primitive demon cave, their minds were a little muddled. Now that they came out of the primitive demon cave and saw the strength of Chu Xiu's side, especially Shang Tianliang, a heaven and earth illuminating realm expert, they instantly sobered up. They could not afford to offend this fiend path cultivator for now. Hence, they could only give up and not provoke Chu Xiu. At this time, the entrance to the primitive demon cave began to tremble. It was clearly about to close. However, just as the primitive demon cave was about to close, a white-robed figure walked out unhurriedly. It was Zhong Xinxiu. Everyone present was stunned for a moment. Didn't this person leave long ago? Why did he come out? Zhong Xinxiu looked around and walked up to Fang Qishao, who was closest to him. He asked, "Excuse me, where is the east? I want to return to the East Sea." Seventh young Master Fang was confused by the question. He subconsciously pointed to the east and said there. Zhong Xinxiu nodded and said, "Many thanks." He subconsciously raised his hand, but after looking at Fang Qishao, he put it down again and turned to leave. In just a few steps, he had already disappeared from everyone's sight and perception. Only after Zhong Xinxiu left did everyone react. This number one person of the present age, could he be someone who had no sense of direction? Before this, they were still wondering why Zhong Xinxiu was the last one to come out even though he had left long ago. It seemed that he had gotten lost in the primitive demon cave, and had only found the exit at the end. At that moment, in the main hall of the Gate of Heaven, Jun Wuxian walked out from the space portal with Lin Songlong in his hand. The elder from the Heaven Gate had been waiting inside. When he saw Jun Wuxian bringing Lin Songlong back, he went up to them and wanted to say something. However, Jun Wuxian waved his hand, and a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Lin Songlong jumped in fright and hurriedly said, "Sect Master, you." Before he could finish speaking, Jun Wuxian sent him flying with a slap. He crashed into the main hall and vomited blood. Jun Wuxian wiped away the blood and said lightly, "I met Zhong Xinxiu and was no match for his great boundless sword Qi and void spirit finger. I will be in seclusion during this period of time. There is news of the birth of the Heaven Pass, so we must treat it seriously." The elder's eyes flashed with horror. It's Zhong Xinxiu again. What is his background? The Heaven Gate was very mysterious, but Zhong Xinxiu of the Great Boundless Heaven was even more mysterious. He was a person without a past. Jun Wuxian turned his gaze to Lin Songlong and said expressionlessly, "Do you know why I hit you?" Lin Songlong lowered his head and said in a low voice, "I know." Kuang Xieyue was a madman, but he was not. He had failed to stop Kuang Xieyue and ruin things, so he naturally deserved to be hit. This time Kuang Xieyue was dead. If Kuang Xieyue was still alive, he would have been better off dead. So he had only suffered 2 slaps, which was already considered very light. Your authority to leave the Heaven Gate has been revoked. Wait for another reincarnation. The next time a Heaven Pass appears, replace it with someone else. Lin Songlong revealed a bitter smile and said, "Yes, Sect Master." In truth, the unluckiest person this time was Lin Songlong. He had been able to maintain a clear mind, but he had been ruined by Kuang Xieyue. But Kuang Xieyue was already dead. How could he bicker with a dead person? At this time, in the northern lands, the primitive devil cave had been destroyed, and the righteous and demonic factions had dispersed. This time, the righteous faction had undoubtedly suffered the most, because not only had they failed to achieve their goal, but they had also suffered heavy losses. The demon seed had been obtained by Yi Xiaonan. Yi Xiaonan, who was already powerful, would definitely advance further this time. Although he did not know what the stone saber that Chu Xiu had obtained was, since it was born from the demon dragon's dragon vein, it was clearly not an ordinary object. And in this battle, many people had died at the hands of Yi Xiaonan and Chu Xiu. Of course, most of them died at the moment when the power of the primitive devil cave erupted. The power of heaven and earth was the most terrifying. After returning to the subduing martial hall, Chu Xiu was also reviewing his actions in the primitive devil cave and reflecting on it. This time in the primitive devil cave, his mistake was indeed a bit big, and he had almost put himself in danger. It could even be said that if Zhong Shunxiu had not arrived in time, he would have been in danger when facing Jun Wuxian. It was just that Chu Xiu's brain circuit was a bit different from ordinary people. Ordinary people who encountered such a thing would definitely warn themselves that next time they could not be so impulsive, and that they should be patient and steady. But after Chu Xiu reflected on it, he did not think that killing Kuang Shiyue was wrong. In fact, if he was given another chance, he would kill Kuang Shiyue again. Chu Xiu believed that his main mistake was underestimating the enemy. He had always regarded Elysium as a normal martial arts sect, but now it seemed that Elysium was not the same as other martial arts sections. So the next time they fought, Chu Xiu had to first think of a way to escape or deal with it. Originally, Chu Xiu had planned to go into seclusion. He had fought so many people in the primitive devil cave, and he had also seen many heaven and earth mysterious realm powerhouses fight with his own eyes. There were even legendary existences like Jun Wuxian and Zhong Shunxiu. He had also comprehended the Great Compassion poem and Dugu Weiwei's break, Formula Saber Intent. He would definitely need to go into seclusion for a period of time to digest it. However, there was still one thing that Chu Xiu had to figure out, and that was how to turn the stone saber he had seized into an existence like the demonic saber Ting Chunyu. So Chu Xiu directly called Lu Jianghe. Taking out the stone saber, Chu Xiu asked, "How should this thing be used? I studied it for a long time, but I didn't find anything strange in it. I wanted to cut it open, but it turned out that this thing was as hard as a divine weapon." Lu Jianghe said, "Didn't I say that this thing needs to be tempered with the rootless sacred flame? And the outer stone skin needs to be refined to become a real demonic saber?" Chu Xiu frowned and said, "But the rootless sacred flame is sealed at the peak of the Kunlun devil cult, and sealed by the Sabodhi Zen monastery with the 6 paths of Buddha's rebirth formation. Once I climb the Kunlun mountain, I will face the siege of the entire righteous martial arts world. Not to mention me, even Yi Xiaonan can't stop them." The Kunlun devil cult could be said to be a taboo in the current martial arts world. Yi Xiaonan's strength was now strong enough. He was the #1 demon in the world, and he had so many helpers from the bright demon lineage. But even with this strength, Yi Xiaonan didn't dare to enter West Kunlun. No one in the martial arts world wanted to see another Kunlun devil cult. At that time, even the old Celestial Master, who had been retiring in the Celestial Master Mansion, would go all out. No one knew what terrifying trump card Wind Cloud Sword Tomb would dig out from the grave. It could be said that if someone wanted to go to West Kunlun, it meant that he would be the enemy of the entire martial arts world. Holding the stone saber, Chu Xiu touched his chin and said, "According to what you said, this stone saber is actually just a saber embryo. It needs to be refined before it can be used. I have a good relationship with the refining master Mo Yezi. I'll ask him to see if he can refine it." Lu Jianghe shook his head and said, "You don't even need to think about it. With the strength of our sect in the past, would there be a shortage of refining masters?" When the sect leader first got listened to Spring Rain, he asked this group of refining masters to think of a way, but none of them could refine it. This stone saber was formed from the devil dragon's dragon vein with boundless devil chi. It is a natural object. And the rootless sacred fire at the peak of West Kunlun was also born from the gathering of the dragon vein. Only a natural object can refine a natural object. Otherwise, it would be useless for anyone else. Chu Xiu frowned. "Doesn't this mean that this thing is useless for the time being?" Lu Jianghe shrugged and said, "It seems so now." Chu Xiu looked at Lu Jianghe with some hostility. He had even used the blood demon transformation technique to get this thing and risked his life. In the end, he was told that he couldn't use it for the time being. Feeling Chu Xiu's gaze, Lu Jianghe hurriedly said, "Don't worry. Haste makes waste. I'm very optimistic about you. It's not impossible for you to take over West Kunlun in the future. Anyway, this magic saber will be yours sooner or later. It's better to grab it first than to let it fall into the hands of others, isn't it?" Chu Xiu waved his hand and asked Lu Jianghe to get out first. This guy had never been reliable, but the last sentence he said really made Chu Xiu a little tempted. It was not impossible for him to take over West Kunlun. It should be said that whether Chu Xiu wanted to take over West Kunlun or not, he would be forced to take this road in the end. The righteous and the demonic were already like fire and water. When the demonic rose, the righteous disappeared. At the moment, Yi Xiaonan was bearing the pressure of most of the righteous. When Chu Xiu also reached Yi Xiaonan's position one day, the pressure would be transferred to him. When Chu Xiu surpassed Yi Xiaonan, the entire righteous Wulin would not sit back and watch Chu Xiu rise. At that time, apart from taking over West Kunlun and completely raising the banner of the devil cult, did Chu Xiu have any other choice? Chapter 990. After sending the others away, Chu Xiu also entered a state of retreat. He needed to digest some of the insights he gained from the fierce battle in the primitive demon cave. The consumption of using the blood demon transformation technique also needed to be repaired. Although Chu Xiu only used it for a short time, and he still had the eternal demon pill, so he didn't suffer too many injuries, there were still some after effects. During the time when Chu Xiu was in retreat, the entire underworld was not calm, and undercurrents were surging. There were two fundamental reasons. One was Yi Xiaonan, and the other was the righteous and demonic martial artists who were released from the deep pool. Yi Xiaonan got the demon seed, which had already made the righteous martial artists very afraid. No one knew to what extent Yi Xiaonan's strength would skyrocket after refining this legendary treasure. Therefore, most of the righteous sects were already extremely afraid of the moon-worshipping cult. Some people even wanted to explore the details of the moon-worshipping cult and attack the moon-worshipping cult when Yi Xiaonan was in retreat. The martial artists who were released from the deep pool also had a great impact on the situation of the entire underworld, especially the Dao lineage. The Buddhists were still fine. Yuan Guang from the Great Light Temple and an ascetic monk from the Sabodhi Monastery were trapped. For the Sabodhi Monastery, one more ascetic monk of the true fire spirit refinement realm was just a little more strength. It was not a big deal. As for Yuan Guang, 800 years ago, he once served as the head of the Vajra Monastery, but he later gave up his position. He was able to suppress the side effects of the furious Vajra Heart Sutra, and his personality was also very peaceful. Knowing that 800 years had passed, he naturally had no intention of fighting for power. He was just ready to use his last time to do his last bit of strength for the sect. Someone was also trapped in Dragon Tiger Mountain, but it was just a real pellet state martial artist. The strength of Dragon Tiger Mountain Taoist Master Mansion 800 years ago could be said to be really not too strong. Only the current Taoist master could hold up the facade. Therefore, even in a place like the primitive demon cave, only a real pellet state martial artist could enter. However, for the pure Yongdao sect and the true martial sect, the people who walked out of the two sects had powerful backgrounds. At this time, in the main hall of Chunyang Dao sect, a middle-aged Taoist priest in a white Taoist robe was reading through all the events that had happened in Chunyang Dao sect over the years. His face was dignified and cold, and anyone who saw him would feel their heart tremble. This middle-aged Taoist was the leader of the 6 Taoist masters of the Heavenly Dipper Hall 800 years ago, Yun Mengzi. In terms of actual age, excluding the 800 years that he had been trapped here, Yun Mengzi was younger than everyone else here. In fact, he was only slightly older than Shi Yunzi, not even 100 years old. The leader of this generation's 6 spiritual masters was Chang Yunzi, who had died at the hands of Chu Xiu. He was already close to 300 years old, a standard old man. As a result, Yun Mengzi was able to serve as the leader of the 6 spiritual masters of Heavenly Dipper Hall in his prime. One could imagine how terrifying his talent and strength were. And this was also because he was accidentally trapped in the primitive demon cave. Otherwise, maybe the next generation or the generation after the Chunyang Dao sect's master would be him. At this time, Yun Mengzi looked at the changes in strength of the Chunyang Dao sect in the past 800 years, and his expression became more and more ugly. Trash. All a bunch of trash. The foundation left behind by the ancestors had been ruined to such a state in just 800 years. It's fine that the true martial arts sect has Ning Xuanji. My Dao sect has many heroes, and it's not surprising that there are powerhouses in any lineage. However, my Chunyang Dao sect was humiliated by Chu Xiu, that demonic cultivator. Even the leader of this generation's 6 spiritual masters died in his hands. And you all turned a blind eye to it. What is this? This is a disgrace. In the past Yun Mengzi's era, the Chunyang Dao sect was still in its heyday. He, the leader of the 6 spiritual masters, was already so young. One could imagine how many older generation martial artists there were in the entire Chunyang Dao sect. It was not like now. Regardless of age, as long as one could reach the real pellet state, they were already the high-level combat power of the Chunyang Dao sect. At this time, listening to Yun Mengzi's angry scolding, Shi Yunzi's expression was very ugly. If their Chunyang Dao sect had the strength of 800 years ago, they would have cut Chu Xiao into pieces long ago. Would they still need to be looked down upon by you here? However, although he cursed in his heart, he didn't say it out loud because Yun Mengzi's identity was a little special. People like the Great Light Temple's Yuanguang were actually very smart. 800 years had passed, and everything had changed. However, in these 800 years of stagnation, he didn't feel that his seniority had increased. So after returning to the Great Light Temple, he still did what he should do. However, Yun Mengzi was different. He happened to be Ling Yunzi's grandmaster. That's right, not the grandmaster of the entire sect, but the grandmaster of his lineage, a direct descendant. Therefore this was a pain in the ass. If Yun Mengzi was just an ancestor of other Chunyang Dao sect, no matter how bad his temper was, he wouldn't dare to be so arrogant in front of Ling Yunzi, the sect master of Chunyang Dao sect, a powerhouse at the heaven and earth enlightenment state. However, he was the direct ancestor of Ling Yunzi's lineage. On the other hand, even if Ling Yunzi was the sect master, even if he was a powerhouse at the heaven and earth enlightenment state, he couldn't be disrespectful to him. Therefore Ling Yunzi could only cough and say, "Grandmaster, no matter how weak our Chunyang Dao sect is, it won't be to this extent." After Chang Yunzi died, of course we also took action. However, Chu Xiao has too many trump cards, so it's not that easy to deal with him. If we force our way through, it'll only cause both sides to suffer. Yun Mengzi sighed and said, 800 years have passed, and the world has changed. I didn't expect our Chunyang Dao sect to fall to such a state. We're being bullied by the demonic path. You should know that 800 years ago, those people from the Devil Dao would flee upon seeing the pure yang astral energy of our pure yang Dao sect. Shi Yunzi, who was at the side, pursed his lips. It should be said that the decline of the Chunyang Dao sect was unstoppable. This was because 500 years ago, a Dugu Weiwei had appeared. 800 years ago, you could make the demonic path flee, but after another 300 years, you can make Dugu Weiwei flee? Based on the Chunyang Dao sect's character, many people had died in the hands of the Kunlun devil cult 500 years ago. Therefore, it's good enough that the Chunyang Dao sect is still around. Why do they have so many demands? Yun Mengzi waved his hand and said, "Let's not care about the past for now. However, sect master, our Chunyang Dao sect can't continue to be so decadent now." Ling Yunzi nodded and said, "I know that. Therefore, during this period of time, our Chunyang Dao sect has been recruiting disciples from all over the world to rebuild our strength. Previously, although we failed to establish a branch in northern Yan, we succeeded in recruiting many talented disciples. After training them successfully, they'll be of great use." Yun Mengzi waved his hand and said, "How long will it take for the younger generation to grow? We're not so old that we can't fight. 10 years is too long, and 100 years is too long. Now we can only seize the day. The power of our Chunyang Dao sect has always relied on the pure yang sword in our hands to kill demons. When the pure yang sword shines on the pugilistic world, will we still have to worry about not having disciples? That diabolism thief named Chu Xiao has killed so many people of our Chunyang Dao sect. How can we let go of this humiliation? This time, we'll start with him." Ling Yunzi's expression changed and he quickly said, "Grandmaster. No. Chu Xiao is not a simple diabolism junior. In fact, the entire Hidden Devil clan respects him. It can be said that he's the leader of the Hidden Devil clan. Moreover, he has people in the heaven and earth mystic realm under him. Although I have the confidence to win, the others are no match for Chu Xiao. Especially now that he's entrenched in the northern Yan land. The new Northern Yan Emperor, Xiangli, was personally supported to the throne by him. He even admitted that in the Northern Yan land, the Xiang royal family is in charge of the imperial court, and he, Chu Xiu, is in charge of the pugilistic world. Although Chu Xiu is only a junior in terms of age, in terms of power, he's already a veritable diabolism giant. He's second only to the moon-worshipping cult's Yi Xiaonan. We can't touch him easily. Yin Mengzi snorted and said, Great devil? In the past, countless great devils died under the sword of our Chunyang Dao sect. If we want to touch them, we should touch the great devils. If we touch those little devils, we'll lose face. Seeing that Ling Yunzi was about to say something, Yin Mengzi waved his hand and said, Sect leader, do you think that I'm a stubborn old man who only knows how to fight and kill, and is impulsive and brainless? Shi Yunzi continued to twitch his mouth. Aren't you? Ling Yunzi said, Grandmaster, that's not what I mean. Yun Mengzi snorted and said, Sect leader, don't forget that I was also the leader of the 6 Temple Guardian Immortals in the past. I'm also qualified to join hands with the current sect leader to discuss some of the important matters of the Chunyang Dao sect. In the past, many important matters were facilitated by us. The methods of the diabolism are ruthless and cruel. To deal with the diabolism, you have to be more ruthless, more cruel, and more unscrupulous than them. Previously, when you besieged Chu Xiu, you were forced to retreat by Chu Xiu. Do you know why? Because you're not as ruthless as him. Don't worry this time, I won't let the Chunyang Dao sect take the risk alone. The old man from the true martial arts cult has also been released. His temper is even more fiery than mine. Although I don't like that old man, he's still capable. Later, I'll go to the true martial arts cult to discuss with him, and make a big move. In today's underworld, the diabolism has disappeared and the diabolism has risen. However, in this underworld, evil will never prevail over good. The previous actions of yours are simply child's play. It's fine if you don't take action, but once you take action, you'll crush all the diabolism demons with a thunderous force. Don't worry, sect leader. When I'm back, I'll give you an explanation. After that, Yin Mengzi walked out of the door directly, not even giving Ling Yunzi a chance to speak. Moreover, looking at the warriors of the Chunyang Dao sect in the main hall, they were all excited by Yin Mengzi's words. The Chunyang Dao sect had been used to being domineering since the beginning. Ling Yunzi had always wanted to reverse this situation, but he had never seen any results. In the end, when Yin Mengzi returned, his temper was very much to the taste of the people of the Chunyang Dao sect. Ling Yunzi sighed. He didn't know whether the outcome this time was good or bad. Chapter 991. Yin Mengzi was Ling Yunzi's grandmaster. This identity was already very awkward. However, the identity of the one from the real martial sect was even more awkward. The one who was released from the real martial sect was the sect leader of the real martial sect 800 years ago, Sage Qingchun Hanjusi. In the 3 great Dao sects, the real martial sect had never been very strong until Ning Xuanji appeared 500 years ago. Therefore, when the primitive devil cave opened 800 years ago, he, the sect leader, personally went there. As a result, he was trapped there, causing the real martial sect to collapse. Perhaps it was because heroes could only be born in adversity. During the 300 years when Han Jusi disappeared, it was the most difficult period for the real martial sect. It was also under this pressure that Ning Xuanji appeared. However, now that Han Jusi had returned, Lu Chonglu was a little embarrassed. A sect could not have 2 sect leaders, right? Fortunately, although Han Jusi was a little hot-tempered, he was not the kind of person who only knew how to fight for fame and fortune. He did not care much about power and status. Therefore, before Lu Chonglu said anything, he took the initiative to give up his position. Lu Chonglu was still the sect leader. He could be an elder in the real martial sect and do his best for the sect. When Yin Mengzi came to him and told him about his plan, Han Jusi's eyes lit up and he immediately said, Of course, no problem. It's unbelievable that the righteous sects, especially the Dao sects, have been reduced to such a state, except for Dragon Tiger Mountain. After 800 years, we have finally reappeared in Jianghu. Maybe this is God's will. Seeing that there is no one in the real martial sect and Pure Yang sect, let us out. Lu Chonglu was also at the side at this time. When he heard this, he quickly stopped him and said, "Ancestor and Taoist priest, the war between the righteous and demonic sects has just ended. The relationship between the righteous and demonic sects is very tense now. Everything needs to be done in the long run." Han Jusi waved his hand and said with some dissatisfaction, "Sect leader, you are good at everything, but your temperament is a little too soft. Since our true martial arts sect has such a powerful person like Ning Xuanji, even if he disappeared together with Dugu Weiwa, our true martial arts sect shouldn't be as powerful as it is now. Sometimes, it's natural to be more decisive when doing things. If every matter is discussed in the long run, the more problems there are, and in the end, there will be no movement." Yin Mengzi said straightforwardly, "Headmaster Lu, you don't have to worry. We have a sense of propriety when we do things. If we don't have a certain degree of certainty, then it wouldn't be called resolute, but reckless." If it was in the past, Lu Chonglu would definitely not agree to such a thing. This was his character, and it was the same for the future development of the true martial arts sect. There was no harm in being careful. Since the true martial arts sect could produce a Ning Xuanji, they could naturally produce a second Ning Xuanji. As long as they could exist in the underworld, there would be countless opportunities. However, Han Jusi was also a sect leader in the past, so his thinking was different from his. Previously, Han Jusi had already taken a step back. Lu Chonglu also didn't want to see his fellow disciples kill each other. Therefore, he could only ask, "Does Taoist Master Yin Mengzi have a general plan?" Yin Mengzi's eyes narrowed as he said, "Of course there is a plan, and this plan not only includes us, but also includes the entire Eastern Qi, the entire righteous martial arts world. A thunderous strike is a fatal blow. If we don't make a big move, it will be meaningless if we still fight on a small scale like before." When Lu Chonglu heard about the general plan that Yin Mengzi and Han Jusi had discussed, his eyes widened. He didn't know if Yin Mengzi and the others had been imprisoned in the primitive devil cave for too long, and they were too stifled. Once they came out, they wanted to do something big. They felt that it was not enough to just have the Tao lineage or the righteous lineage take action. They also wanted to pull Eastern Qi to take action together. From a war between the righteous and demonic sects, it would become a world of chaos. Now that Chu Xiu had personally supported Northern Yan Xiangli to take the throne, the Northern Yan had already become a country protected by the demonic sections. Moreover, within the entire Northern Yan, there were very few Tao and Buddhist sections. There were almost no famous Tao sections. The Great Light Temple was in the Northern Yan, but it was in the extreme north, so it had almost no impact on the Northern Yan. In addition, the Northern Yan Emperor Xiangli had personally announced Chu Xiu as the supreme of the Northern Yan martial arts world. The entire Northern Yan had become a den of demons. At this time, if they didn't mobilize the Eastern Qi Imperial Court to take action, it would be a waste of the situation. Yin Mengzi, Han Jusi, and the other Tao experts from 800 years ago, their way of doing things and vision were very different from the current martial artists. 800 years ago, the pugilistic world had yet to experience the Kunlun devil cult's unification of the pugilistic world. Therefore, the sects in the pugilistic world were flourishing. The righteous and the demonic sects attacked each other, and there were even some who became friends with each other. Moreover, the world 800 years ago was not like it was now. There were many small and large countries, and there were at least a dozen of them in total. At that time, there was no West Chu, and the Northern Yan was only a small barbarian country in the north. Only Eastern Qi was slightly famous. However, the Eastern Qi emperor at that time did not have the surname Lu, but Jiang. Therefore, the sect masters of the martial arts world in that era, not to mention their strength, were much more generous in their way of doing things. They would easily ally with dozens of forces and set off waves of chaos. There was even a sect that controlled a small country. At that time, the distinction between the pugilistic world and the imperial court was not that clear. There was me and you and me. It was very normal for them to join forces and attack each other. Based on Lu Chongliu's character, he originally did not want to agree to this kind of thing. But with Han Jusi's insistence, he had no other choice. He could see that Han Jusi was also thinking for the sake of the true martial arts sect. Moreover, He had taken the initiative to concede to him. Moreover, Lu Chonglu did not want to get into an argument with Han Jusi over this matter. Therefore, he had no choice but to agree. Together, they went to the great Liang city of Eastern Qi. Although the true martial arts sect was not as powerful as it was when Ning Xuanji was still around, in the Eastern Qi imperial court, the true martial arts sect was the most popular one. It was even stronger than the White Tiger Hall that had surrendered to the Eastern Qi imperial court. The true martial arts sect was the national religion of Eastern Qi. Any sacrificial ceremony in the Eastern Qi imperial court had to be carried out by the true martial arts sect. Even the imperial astronomer of the Eastern Qi imperial court was a disciple of the true martial arts sect. Therefore, when Lu Chonglu came forward, Lu Haochang even came forward to greet him personally. Although in the eyes of the late Xianglong, Lu Haochang was a mediocre good-for-nothing, it had to be said that Lu Haochang had lived a much better life than Xianglong. He was a little older than Xianglong, but Xianglong had died of illness. Yet he could still hold his concubines and have fun every night. The number of princes was already close to 3 digits. Seeing Lu Chonglu coming, Lu Haochang laughed and greeted him. "Sage Lu, you haven't come to Great Liang City for a long time. This time, I have to entertain you well." And the 3 yuan internal cultivation scripture that Sage Lu passed on to me last time is very useful. You can practice for a quarter of an hour in the day, and you can persist for 2 hours at night. It's quite effective. Lu Chongliu's face couldn't help but turn black when he heard this. He had given Lu Haochang the most orthodox Taoist basic internal strength, to strengthen the body. It was used to help Lu Haochang prolong his life. In the end, he used it as an aphrodisiac. Yin Mingzi and Han Jusi didn't think so much. 800 years ago, the sects had a very close relationship with the imperial court. Not to mention teaching this kind of cultivation method to the emperor, there were many who directly refined aphrodisiac for the emperor. Who are these 2? Lu Chonglu introduced. This is Sage Yin Mengzi of the Chunyang Dao sect. This is Sage Qing Chun of the True Martial sect. Lu Chonglu didn't say in detail about the things that happened in the primitive Devil's Cave, and what happened 800 years ago. Of course, there was no need to say it. It was enough for Lu Haochang to know their identity. After entering the hall, Lu Chonglu didn't keep Lu Haochang in suspense. He directly told everything to Lu Haochang. After listening, Lu Haochang fell into silence. He didn't directly agree. It was true that Lu Haochang was mediocre, but he was only mediocre when compared to Xianglong. Moreover, mediocre didn't mean that he was an incapable ruler. Lu Haochang had sat on the throne for several decades, and he still sat so stably. An incapable ruler wouldn't be able to do this. He might not be as capable or as decisive as Xianglong, but his only advantage was his cautiousness. He wouldn't make a decision on such a major matter, even if the other party was the orthodoxy's true martial sect. Therefore, Lu Haochang directly evaded. "We still can't make a decision on such a major matter. Everyone, please wait a moment. We will gather the officials to discuss this matter, and then we will give you an answer." At this moment, Yun Mingzi suddenly said, "Can your majesty listen to a few words from this humble Taoist?" "Please, sage," Yun Mingzi said in a low voice. "This matter doesn't just concern the conflict between the righteous and demonic branches of the Jianghu. In fact, it also involves the imperial court. Although Chu Xiu is still considered a junior, in reality, he has already taken control of the Yinma branch. In the demonic path, he is second only to Yi Xiaonan. The Northern Yan Emperor was supported by Chu Xiu to ascend to the throne. The Northern Yan Emperor even said that in the Northern Yan Jianghu, Chu Xiu is the supreme ruler. The relationship between the two sides is already so close. Your Majesty should be able to see what this means. Therefore, if the demonic path rises and the Tao falls, it won't just be the demonic path that rises, but also the Northern Yan Imperial Court. If the Tao falls, it won't just be the righteous path that falls, but the Eastern Qi Imperial Court as well. Your Majesty, we need to plan ahead for this matter. We are not only here for ourselves, but also for the Central Plains warriors. Now that Eastern Qi has taken control of the Central Plains, once the demonic path controls the Northern Yan, the entire Central Plains will be plunged into misery and suffering." Hearing Yun Mingzi's words, Lu Haocheng was a little flustered. It was true that he was a mediocre emperor, but he was not a fatuous one. It was impossible for him to unify the world in his generation. He knew very well that he could not do such a thing. But even if he could not unify the world, the Eastern Cheese Empire could not be lost in his hands, could he? Otherwise, how would he face his ancestors? You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.